Automobiles and emergency response vehicles maintained constant activity. He observed a pair of gentlemen swiftly placing an injured female into a rescue vehicle. She teetered on the precipice of hypovolemic shock due to profuse bleeding. A fellow emergency medical technician reported a separate incident of pulmonary trauma, attributed to contaminated food ingestion. He emphasized preparedness for the immediate delivery of an epinephrine injection. They deliberated on the scarcity of heart stimulants, owing to an overwhelming patient load. A multitude were stricken with the identical affliction. In close proximity, a frantic woman implored her ailing spouse to resist slumber. They were nearly at the medical facility. He bemoaned the dearth of vacant beds and the inundated emergency assistance line. Tien deduced that the healthcare infrastructure was faltering under the strain. The situation was compounded by the repercussions of radioactive discharge from the adjacent power stations. Tien contemplated whether he could acquire sufficient provisions to endure the ordeal. Law enforcement officers were informing residents that the locale was a government-sanctioned emergency resource acquisition center. They stressed the imperative for all to adhere to regulations, maintain organized lines, and refrain from hastiness. Each individual had a procurement constraint: 5 units of rice, 5 units of grain, and a single unit of produce, validated by proper identification. Altercations ignited as people jostled for position in the queue. One individual asserted they had been waiting for 5 hours and merited precedence. Another contended the spot was rightfully theirs. Prior to a lavatory intermission, animosity intensified, particularly when someone professed to be the chief executive of a regional enterprise, precipitating confrontations with fellow queuers. Some were even forcibly ejected. Meanwhile, at the periphery, a juvenile female pleaded with her mother for sustenance. Tien witnessed 2 individuals grappling over a meager resource, each declaring prior claim. A frenetic scramble for provisions persisted amidst the throng. As Tien contemplated his girlfriend's leased dwelling, just a short distance away, a rapidly moving vehicle narrowly avoided him as he prepared to turn. The vehicle abruptly stopped, and a man emerged, tapping on Tien's window, to inquire whether he had originated from the resource center and what he sought. He had spotted Tien meandering around the department store marketplace. The man attempted to proffer various fruits and vegetables: watermelon, cucumber, squash, tomatoes. However, Tien challenged him, stating he would only purchase if the man consumed a portion first. The man wavered, questioning Tien's distrust, and maintaining he had found nothing to purchase for himself. Tien, exasperated, instructed him to depart. The man questioned Tien's hostility, affirming his adherence to the law. Tien then brandished a firearm, causing the man to flinch in terror. He implored Tien to resolve the matter peacefully and reiterated his lawfulness. Tien sternly admonished the man that, if he apprehended him engaging in such unscrupulous commerce again, he would discharge his weapon without hesitation or consequence. The man acquiesced anxiously, gathering his belongings, and pondering his predicament. He hastily entered his vehicle and departed. Tien proceeded towards his girlfriend's residence. Ascending the staircase, he reached John's entrance and rapped, announcing his presence. Receiving no response, he began to apprehend her absence. Retrieving the duplicate key from beneath the welcome mat, he unlatched the door and proceeded inward. Tien was astonished to discover the habitually tidy room in disarray. Tainted produce and medication containers were strewn about. Amongst them, he identified Tianrun's antimicrobial medication, a product notorious for its poor quality, from a regional pharmaceutical manufacturer. He pondered Zhong's rationale for acquiring such items. Discerning no indication of bloodshed or unintended toxic ingestion, Tien deduced that the dwelling had been pillaged, but not in Zhong's characteristically methodical fashion. There was no evidence of forcible entry either. Everything appeared purposefully disarranged. Amidst the pandemonium outside, Tien contemplated her potential whereabouts. The setting transitions to the city's outskirts, where a subpar establishment functions as a temporary lodging. It's designated as a Level 1 sanctuary, furnishing rudimentary accommodations. The Level 1 sanctuary's proficiency reward is Verity's Vision, granting the user the ability to perceive comprehensive details regarding entities and items. Furthermore, the entitlements encompass a remote-controlled sanctuary management system providing instantaneous updates on the haven's condition and inventory accessibility even during the player's absence. The grounds encompass 30 mu, suitable for angling. Contemplating his circumstances, Tien recognized his current predicament. He resided in a deteriorated Level 1 cultivation structure. He determined to accumulate sufficient points to enhance his farming implements, without compromising on radiation countermeasures. As he labored in the plantation, Han arrived, enthusiastically declaring the germination of the seedlings. Tianhan and He congregated to observe the flourishing growth, filling Han Tian with elation. Displayed on the monitors, the successful sowing of the tomato seeds was confirmed, with maturation anticipated within 48 hours. He was gratified with the advancement, observing that the radiation-resistant seeds were performing as projected, developing rapidly and yielding increased points. He and Han could undoubtedly endure in the post-apocalyptic realm. Han voiced her initial skepticism regarding the seeds, believing they had all perished. However, she attributed their success to Tian's efforts. Tian confidently declared his resourcefulness, reiterating the guidelines he had established for her adherence. She affirmed her comprehension and pledged to defy underestimation. Han restated the regulations. Consume only Tian-approved sustenance. Obtain authorization before departing the farm. Report any anomalous creatures. And monitor He to prevent indiscriminate consumption. Tian directed He to heed the instructions as well. Recognizing the ripeness of the anti-radiation crops, Tian resolved to harvest them immediately. He discovered a plentiful yield, particularly with the radiation-resistant tomatoes, which proved to be nourishing. Sustained consumption promised enhanced well-being. With a shelf life of 30 days, Tian contemplated their potential to augment physical conditioning, and eagerly sampled one. Instantly, a soothing warmth permeated his body, alleviating the exhaustion from days of arduous labor. In this food-scarce, post-apocalyptic environment, the enhanced crops provided not only sustenance, but also apparent attribute enhancements. Tian pondered the prospect of becoming a fully qualified farm proprietor. Within this framework, unlocking privileges, acquiring goods from the marketplace, and improving shelters all hinged on accumulating points, primarily obtained through the exchange mechanism. This system facilitated the reclamation of crops, animal protein, and minerals, each categorized and valued accordingly. Supreme God tier items yielded the highest point value. These were superior crops. God tier potent crops commanding substantial points. Ancient medical-grade specialized crops were renowned for their therapeutic attributes. Anti-radiation grade crops, engineered for radiation-contaminated environments, led Tian to realize the criticality of mastering this exchange system for their survival and advancement in this formidable new reality. Tian learned the point values for various crop grades. Level 1 anti-radiation grade crops. 1 kilogram equated to 1 point. Level 2 ancient medical grade crops. 1 kilogram yielded 100 points. Level 3 God tier powerful crops. 1 kilogram yielded 1,000 points. Level 4 Supreme God tier enhanced crops. 1 kilogram yielded 100,000 points. This exchange system offered comprehensive services, encompassing procurement, distribution, and reclamation, making it an indispensable instrument for transforming the farm into a premier military installation. Given sufficient point accumulation, Tian eagerly awaited this metamorphosis. Reflecting on the anti-radiation grade crops, Tian contemplated the potential of the 3 superior grades, each promising even greater benefits. Filled with anticipation, he chose to examine the ancient medical grade crop harvest. Inspecting the carrots, he verified their 10% maturation rate, consistent with ancient medical grade crop expectations. Further analysis revealed these carrots had reached full maturation. They possessed the capability to neutralize detrimental effects, including toxins, diseases, and irreparable harm from adverse consequences. Remarkably, they could be preserved indefinitely. Tian grasped the immense value these crops held for their survival and future endeavors in this demanding new world. Tian was astonished by the newfound security provided by the ancient medical-grade crops. Knowing medical care was no longer a concern. Shifting his focus to the recycling interface, he opted to exchange 70% of the harvested crops for points and retain the remaining 30% as provisions in his pack. Confirming the reclamation of 200 kilograms of radiation-resistant crops, Tian acquired 2,000 points and discovered that 3 ancient medical-grade crops were stored in the depot. Content with the result, he now possessed 30 kilograms of anti-radiation grade crops securely stored. To his astonishment, Etienne received accolades for accomplishing his initial recycling assignment and attained the distinction of Recycling Master. His prize was a sophisticated automated agricultural assistant. As the automaton materialized in his hand and gestured, Tian harbored doubts about its practicality. Considering its diminutive size, he pondered the accomplishment framework. surmising it might yield further prizes and valuable implements. Nevertheless, he couldn't dispel the sensation that the robot was fixated on him. In a peculiarly disquieting manner, as the automaton promptly commenced harvesting the produce, Tien was astounded, baffled by how it appeared to foresee his intentions. Could it be that his cognition was somehow interconnected with the system, facilitating instantaneous mental directives to the automaton? He was awestruck by its aptitudes, recognizing that even an agrarian robot could be so state-of-the-art. The notion of accumulating sufficient points to acquire a combat robot entered his mind, contemplating how it could guarantee Han's well-being. Overjoyed by their triumphant crop sprouting, Tien summoned Han for sustenance, requesting she cease viewing animated programs. They relished substantial poultry drumsticks together that day, commemorating their agricultural triumph. Han, although content, reminded Tien of their necessity to be more thrifty with provisions. Hey, their comrade also enthusiastically partook in the repast, Tien assured Han. They could recommence sowing and utilize some of their preserved nourishment. He then cautioned her that if anyone unearthed their food reserves, she would be prohibited from consuming anything for 3 days. Han consented, pledging to safeguard their provisions' secrecy. Tien proposed they dine, knowing Han must be weary of instant ramen. After 2 days, he presented the initial poultry drumstick to He, expressing gratitude for his safeguarding of both Tian and Han. Han affectionately embraced He, proclaiming him the finest. Before releasing him and inquiring about Bai's well-being, Tien consoled her that Bai was still convalescing from grave wounds and wouldn't be able to visit her for a duration. However, he pledged they would frolic together once he recuperated. Han concurred and vowed not to disturb Bai in the garret. Abruptly, Tien detected an alert signifying an attempted intrusion. He swiftly accessed the surveillance display and determined the trespasser was an unarmed, 42-year-old man posing a threat level of 3. To his amazement, he recognized it was Uncle Nan. Tien pondered how Nan had arrived there under these circumstances. Tien ventured outside and approached Nan, inquiring about his presence. Nan, inhaling a cigarette, exhaled gradually before acknowledging Tien as his superior. He elucidated his dire predicament, imploring assistance and inquiring if Tian's farm possessed any excess provisions. Nan was desperate. His dwelling had been pillaged, his stored sustenance purloined, and market costs were inflated due to scarcity. Tian expressed regret, disclosing that his own food reserves were exhausted, exacerbated by a recent harvest shortfall due to genetic alteration. Despite this, Tian offered the meager rations he could provide, conveying appreciation to Nan for caring for his family. Nan, dejected, confessed he had already approached numerous kin, all incapable of aiding him. Tien then presented Nan with a package of instant noodles, encouraging him to explore alternative solutions. Nan expressed profuse gratitude, to which Tien wished him good fortune. Nan, resigned to their unfortunate predicament, departed. Tian estimated the food would sustain Nan for approximately 5 days. Acknowledging it wasn't substantial, in precarious times like these, human motives were erratic, inciting Tien to remain vigilant. He resolved to check on Nan that evening, deeming the ordinary vegetables stored in the freezer unnecessary. At nightfall, Tian, accompanied by Han, discreetly approached Nan's residence, each carrying their personal refreshments. Unexpectedly, they heard Zhao shriek. Nan silenced Tian, cautioning him against alarming Zhao. Zhao continued expectorating blood, his state deteriorating rapidly. Emotionally distressed, Nan questioned why Zhao's ailment was worsening, instead of ameliorating as Zhao continued to expectorate blood. Tian and Han peered through the window pane. Han was visibly terrified by the spectacle. Tian reassured her that everything would be satisfactory, encouraging her to avert her gaze. Reflecting on Zhao's symptoms, Tian hypothesized that Zhao had inadvertently ingested irradiated produce, clarifying the swift decline. However, Tian questioned if Zhao, being the optimal subject for experimentation, would endure this tribulation. Ultimately, Zhao's destiny hinged on chance. The window pane shattered as a satchel hurtled into Nan's dwelling, startling both him and Zhao. Nan became enraged, demanding to know who hurled it. Zhao advocated caution and proposed they examine the parcel. Hesitantly, Nan acquiesced, instructing Xiao to remain stationary while he investigated. Upon unsealing the pouch, Nan was astonished to discover fresh produce and provisions inside. Overwhelmed with sentiment, Zhao voiced his yearning to live, prepared to attempt anything even if it entailed being dishonest about his health. Nan crumbled, confessing that even the medical facility couldn't aid Zhao. but he couldn't endure witnessing his suffering passively. Resolute, Nan persuaded Xiao to consume the nourishment. Imploring him to masticate thoroughly, Xiao shrieked and convulsed violently momentarily. Before abruptly ceasing, Nan celebrated Xiao's seeming betterment. Concurrently, Tian observed a street lamp flickering back to illumination, signaling the re-establishment of power and potentially cellular service. He promptly contacted his partner, Zhang, but she didn't respond despite the audible ringing. The perspective shifted to a vehicle in motion where multiple men were seated. A cellular device belonging to one of them began to ring. They contemplated the owner of the ringing phone until the proprietor identified it as Zhong's, proposing they deactivate it, given that communication had been reinstated. One of them inquired about their food reserves, relieved that they possessed sufficient supplies for a month, content with their choice to heed their commander. They deliberated on their intentions. The most imposing man quelled their inquiries. Stressing the significance of wealth and decisive action, they all concurred following the event at Nan's residence. Tian and Han hastily departed in their vehicle. Han commented on the remarkable transformation she observed in Xiao, how he had been expelling blood prior to consuming the carrot, but swiftly recuperated, his pallor transitioning from ashen to cerulean. Tian acknowledged Han's descriptive account, evocative of her fondness for animated films. Unexpectedly, a creature assaulted their automobile. From above, Tian spotted it, a simian with menacing talons gazing through the window. He directed Han to remain composed and maintain a firm grip. She acquiesced apprehensively, adhering to his instruction. Tian steered the car in a serpentine pattern, endeavoring to dislodge the primate. He then instructed Han to lower her head, which she did submissively, notwithstanding their attempts. The simian persisted, and ultimately positioned itself in front of the vehicle. Reacting swiftly, Tian veered the automobile, resulting in the monkey colliding with a stone. Drawing his firearm, Tian discharged a shot at the monkey, guaranteeing it presented no further menace. Exiting the vehicle to examine the situation, Tian discovered a pool of blood where the simian had fallen. Amidst the blood, he located an encoded communication. Bewildered, he pondered its origin. As there were no proximate breeding facilities or zoological parks, Tian's thoughts reverted to the desperate condition of the city. As he drove homeward, he advised Han to unwind and watch her animation, clarifying that he had some affairs to manage. Concurring, she departed, leaving Tian to confront Bai. Still in his transformed condition, donning protective handwear, Tian pondered if the ancient medicinal carrot could counteract the consequences of radiation on Bai and reinstate his lucidity. Hesitantly, he offered the carrot to Bai, hoping for a favorable result. Bai emitted a loud growl in reaction. Meanwhile, Han, captivated by her cartoon, detected disquieting sounds and became apprehensive about Tian's extended absence, hastening to locate him. She entered the chamber where Tian and Bai were, intending to jest. She lightly touched Tian's back. Startling him, he was relieved to perceive her. Tian inquired if it was her. Han affirmed and playfully chided him for being frightened. However, their focus swiftly shifted to Bai lying immobile, surrounded by blood. Han was overwhelmed by grief. Crumbling in despair, Tian implored her to regain composure as she wept, inquiring why they couldn't rescue Bai. With the carrots that had revived Zhao, Tian somberly clarified that the carrots couldn't undo genetic alterations, like Bai's. Han continued lamenting, expressing her profound anguish at the prospect of Bai's demise. The following day, they conducted the last rites for Bai and bade him a somber adieu. Han remained taciturn throughout. Tian tenderly grasped her hand, proposing they retreat indoors as it was becoming late. Despite her absorption in the animation, Tian interjected to invite her for supper, preparing her favorite dish. Han didn't offer a verbal reply, but gestured that she desired his company within the house, to which Tian consented. Later, Tian was seated outside and noticed a broadcast regarding radiation-resistant crops approaching maturation, prompting him to make preparations for their harvest. Shortly thereafter, they gathered approximately 500 kilograms of radiation-resistant crops and 10 kilograms of ancient medicinal-grade crops. A compact automaton returned to Tian, verifying successful points redemption. Consequently, his Level 1 dilapidated greenhouse promoted to a Level 2 standard dwelling. Nevertheless, Tian received a cautionary notice, indicating his protective haven was merely designated Level 3, adequate for deterring minor wildlife, but precarious against more substantial dangers. It emphatically recommended the immediate implementation of a defensive infrastructure. Tian deemed safeguarding the farm his paramount objective. With existing harvest yields generating significant energy, he opted to defer production expansion, augmenting the barrier fortifications from level 1 to 2, and successfully procuring the boundary energy network. This elevated his security preparedness to level 1. Mindful of the outstanding credits, he prioritized obtaining automated sentinels for Han's well-being. He located a guardian priced at 3,500 points, and determined that liquidating the harvested crops deposited in the storage facility would almost offset the expenditure. Assured of his capacity to amass further points if necessary, Tien finalized the acquisition of a level 1 hummingbird and a level 2 hound. Observing the hummingbird in operation, Tien admired its accuracy, as it methodically eliminated fallen foliage with projectiles. With the aerial patrol drone now accessible, Tien resolved to evaluate the terrestrial combat capabilities, commanding the hound to obliterate a boulder. The hound employed its energy beam to effortlessly pulverize the rock, leaving Tien demonstrably reassured by the triumphant exhibition. He subsequently introduced Han to the hound, elucidating that it would escort and safeguard her. Tien proposed the name Bai, which profoundly touched Han. Concurrently, within a metropolitan edifice, a man informed Liang Honey that they had effectively neutralized the erratic specimens. With solely the data from subject number 7 steadily escalating, he remarked that it could now breach 5mm steel plating. With ease, Liang nonchalantly inquired about the opposing faction status. The man responded that Ren was discontent with their inability to secure medical contributions, which could potentially engender complications if disclosed to headquarters. Composedly seated, Liang disregarded Ren's apprehensions. Disparaging her as a mere girl with negligible sway, he guaranteed the man that their endeavors were conducted covertly, rendering it challenging for Ren to initiate a fruitful inquiry. Lacking a starting point, the man concurred, adding that headquarters remained oblivious to their operations. Liang directed him to maintain close surveillance on Ren, to thwart her from impeding their enterprise. With that, Liang departed the chamber, pondering the prospect of a substantial windfall, awaiting discovery. The setting transitions to Ren, who was pacing irately, demanding Liang's whereabouts. The woman expressed regret, stating that Liang was presently absent from the company. Ren was creating considerable difficulties for them. Therefore, he should remain. Just as Ren opened the door and questioned Liang's intention, he remarked that currently, the entire southern region's healthcare infrastructure was incapacitated. As a medical enterprise, Liang should direct his personnel to proactively collaborate with the hospital, contributing apparatus and pharmaceuticals, rather than being preoccupied with animal experimentation. Liang retorted that it was the general manager's office, and her intrusion was inappropriate. He was an entrepreneur, and his objective was to capitalize on every opportunity. He doubted that conventional medical interventions could alleviate that global pandemic. Ren inquired about the nature of the ailment. Liang responded that she was also a company stakeholder and benefited from dividends. Could she envision the potential rewards if they devised a remedy? Ren questioned if Liang's research had yielded any advancements, observing that even the Yanhuan Federal Authority had yet to formulate any efficacious medications. She declared her intention to inspect his laboratory. Liang claimed he was jesting, asserting that such breakthroughs couldn't materialize so rapidly. He suggested that with increased collaboration and greater personnel allocation to the project, expedition would be achieved. Ren stated she would subsequently visit the laboratory to assess the progress and guarantee her effective collaboration with the endeavor. Liang assured her of her welcome and confirmed the arrangement of personal escorts. Ren consented to depart. Leon escorted her out. As Ren walked, a young man accompanied her and remarked that the technical staff deemed her office visit too brief for a comprehensive scan, and accessing the clandestine laboratory entrance was presently improbable. Ren commented that it was a long-standing predicament and inquired if the youth had obtained a confession from the apprehended researcher. The youth responded negatively, clarifying that they were blindfolded during each entry and exit, but they were in possession of keycards. Ren expressed gratitude for the intelligence. Then she presented a card and pondered alternative locations, excluding those locations, and pondered if the most perilous location could also be the most secure. She stepped into the lab, and a gentleman presented himself as Tuza, tasked with escorting Ren and elucidating everything. He volunteered to provide a tour and then dashed off. The narrative commences in a grocery store where our protagonist, Tian, is procuring provisions and chooses to amass canned goods. Meanwhile, the news report in the background keeps the public informed about the escalating reports of wounded creatures. while advising residents to refrain from venturing out after nightfall. Patrons in the market are also conversing about a contagious illness, known as influenza, capable of fatally afflicting a person in a matter of days. The origin of the malady remains unknown. Unperturbed by these events, Tian is occupied with loading cartons of groceries into his pickup truck, meticulously ensuring the inclusion of every essential provision for his homestead and agricultural land. His remaining task is to acquire sufficient diesel fuel. Upon completing this errand, he intends to visit his sibling, Han, and prepare a repast with the venison he procured earlier. During his commute, he receives a telephone call from his romantic partner, who suggests a suitable occupation for him, one that would confer upon him a respectable standing in the community. Nevertheless, he declines to relinquish Han to an orphanage. This enrages his girlfriend, who harbors no desire to nurture a child. Lacking consanguinity, she even admonishes him, threatening to terminate their relationship and forsake any thoughts of matrimony should he persist in this course of action. Her utterance is abruptly truncated as his truck narrowly avoids a collision. He executes a last-minute emergency stop. Gazing outward, he discerns a creature charging directly towards the truck. Initially, he presumes it to be a canine, but is aghast to discover it is an ovine, remarkably still animate despite sustaining a cranial blow. In the ensuing moment, the sheep flees into the forested area, and he resolves against reporting the episode to the traffic authorities. After a period, he reaches his residence, where his younger sister extends a warm greeting. Observing the abundance of supplies he has brought, she proffers her assistance. He entrusts her with a small sack to facilitate her aid during their journey home. She proudly declares the completion of all the assigned chores. She enumerates her accomplishments. Following these exertions, she is overcome with fatigue, anticipating that the stew he will prepare will provide solace. He inquires whether she desires a carrot and venison stew, to which she joyfully assents. Subsequently, he apprehends his canine attempting to consume the crops, and administers a cautionary tap on its head, emphasizing its prohibition from consuming them. Unbeknownst to them, a portion of the harvest has become poisonous. As they traverse past the barn, the bovine within, which has also ingested the toxic herbage, exhibits crimson eyes with an insect perched upon it. Inside the dwelling, Tian is preparing a meal for his sister, while the news broadcasts the impending occurrence of the most remarkable solar eclipse of the century. She expresses excitement upon hearing this news. She inquires whether daylight will transform into night as a consequence. Meanwhile, she consumes her meal with gusto, reflecting on Tian's advancements not only as a huntsman, but also as a culinary artist. Tian, conversely, clarifies that daylight will not fully succumb to darkness during the eclipse, but the sun will exhibit a diminished luminosity. He grants her permission to observe the event using specialized eyewear he provides. Meanwhile, the countdown concludes and the eclipse transpires. Abruptly, electrical power ceases and the air becomes frigid. His canine commences barking vociferously. Han gestures outdoors and he is astonished to witness a snowstorm. Commencing amidst the summer season, he instructs her to seek refuge indoors while he secures the livestock. He commands his canine to remain by her side. He ventures outside and summons his other canine companion, Xiaohei. Suddenly he perceives the sun's radiance behind the eclipse. The unseasonal blizzard and the sun's reappearance leave him utterly bewildered. In the subsequent instant, his canine's barking transforms into menacing growls directed at something behind him. It is revealed to be the same mutated bovine. While Tian struggles to fully grasp the circumstances, as comprehension dawns upon him, he hastens to retrieve his compound bow, which he espies resting upon a log. He seizes it instantly and aims at the transmuted bovine. In the next moment, he discharges 3 arrows consecutively. However, he is astounded to observe that, despite all 3 projectiles piercing the creature's cranium, it remains animate. Recognizing the gravity of the situation, he resolves to shoot once more. Suddenly, a display materializes before him, indicating that his quiver is depleted, while 3 targets are in proximity. Initially, the display bewilders him, but upon inspecting his pocket, he confirms the absence of arrows. He is struck by the bovine, but is now poised to, his attention, however, diverted to his canine companion. The dog was gazing intently towards the residence. He instantly discerned that his sibling was in peril, and dashed inside the dwelling. His other canine had also transformed into a monstrous creature, now menacingly growling at Han before it could launch an assault. Tian propelled it away with a forceful kick, swiftly gathering Han into his embrace, and informed her of his intention to escort her to the sanctuary. while cautioning her against venturing outside. She inquired about their canine companion, and he apprised her of its perilous transformation during their journey. He caught sight of a monitor once more, and deduced that this was unequivocally not an apparition. He placed Han within a chamber, emphatically warning her against exiting under any circumstances. In the ensuing moment, the count of mutated creatures on his display escalated to 5. He secured the girl within the room and hastened forward, where Xiao Bai was poised to strike him, but was thwarted by Xiao He. He pressed onward, formulating a plan to confront the bovine, then retreated to assist his canine companion. He grasped the axe and braced himself as the bovine charged. As it drew near, he evaded the onslaught, resulting in the bovine's horns becoming embedded in the tree trunk. He was on the verge of assaulting the bovine when Xiao Bai sank its teeth into his neck. At that juncture, he questioned the fate of his black dog. Before he could further contemplate, the bovine impaled its horn into his abdomen. Subsequently, he began to perceive peculiar sounds. His display revealed the commencement of the apocalyptic game. His consciousness implored him to resist succumbing to slumber, despite his lack of comprehension regarding the events transpiring around him. Nevertheless, he resolved to safeguard Han as he retrieved the axe once more. In the next instant, a screen materialized, which proclaimed the successful commencement of the Apocalypse survival game match. The apocalyptic game loaded successfully, and Tian became its participant. He found himself in a dilapidated state. Commencing at level 1, he obtained the Eye of Truth as a recompense, and his classification was designated as B. To ascend to a fortress, he required 800,000 points. Prostrate on the ground, he awakened, pondering his survival. His tattered garments and bloodstains persisted. But he was astonished to observe the disappearance of his wounds. Perplexed, he inquired about the whereabouts of Cao and Bai. An unusual sensation enveloped him, and he realized the demise of both the bovine and Bai in close proximity. He questioned the occurrences during his period of unconsciousness, recognizing that such devastation could not be inflicted by a human. He sensed a transformation within himself, welcomed into the Apocalypse survival game. As his status activated, a surge of power coursed through him, feeling akin to being struck by a radiant beam, igniting a fury within him upon seeing the bovine still animate. Tian lashed out at it with his axe. He dismissed thoughts of his recent ordeals, contemplating his newfound capabilities, including his regenerative abilities and the peculiar detonation he had witnessed. As Tian assimilated the situation, the realization that this transcended a mere game intensified. The system had fully initialized, and his sanctuary had been successfully erected. Points were allocated to novices. Initial rewards were disseminated, and participants were encouraged to evaluate themselves. Tian pondered whether this deluge of information was directly implanted into his psyche. He ascertained that the initial wave of devastation had concluded, with the subsequent wave slated to commence in 30 days. Natural calamities loomed ominously, and the sanctuary represented the ultimate bastion of security. Tian felt the gravity of responsibility to not merely endure, but to also reinforce his sanctuary into an impregnable stronghold. The initial wave had already rendered the land toxic, depriving humanity of sustenance, leaving him apprehensive about the implications of the impending second wave. Examining Bai, Tian deduced that he had lost consciousness, based on the information he had gathered. Bai and the others must have undergone mutation after ingesting irradiated flora, contaminated vegetation. After securing Bai within a makeshift enclosure to avert any harm, Tian bound him securely and shifted his attention to checking on Han. Upon entering the sanctuary, he descended the staircase in darkness, attempting to activate the illumination. He discovered that they remained inoperative. His mobile device displayed no signal, indicating the disruption of the communication infrastructure. However, the auxiliary diesel generator provided a measure of respite, utilizing the dim luminescence of a phoenix. Tian scrutinized the chamber, questioning Han's location and the absence of any activity. Detecting Han's legs, he hastened towards her and discovered her recumbent form. His system indicated that Han was in a state of peaceful slumber. She roused at the sound of his approach and inquired as to why he hadn't unfolded the mattress. Instead of resting on the floor, she explained her patient anticipation for his return, recalling a brilliant flash of light and nothing further, before inquiring about his well-being. He reassured her that everything was under control, and there was no cause for alarm. Han inquired about Bai's location. Tian clarified that Bai was wounded and currently unavailable. He recommended she rest further while he attended to some tasks. Han concurred and dozed off again. As she slumbered, Tennessee contemplated the lack of mutated domesticated creatures, and questioned how this framework diverged from internet-based gaming. Upon closer examination, he unearthed an initial perk that felt vaguely recognizable. Nonetheless, it was underwhelming as he had anticipated armaments or proficiencies, but discovered instead that he required an additional 99 points to initiate the application. Gazing at the display, he spotted a question mark in a corner and pondered its meaning. It seemed the principal currency of the framework was points, and he remembered the seed he had sown in the toxic terrain. Recognizing its steep price, he understood he couldn't presently acquire it. He decided to inspect the provisions at his residence, aware that those in immediate contact with the Earth were already tainted in various manners. As the network went offline, Tian grasped it might require a period to restore. He was skeptical the external circumstances were favorable. Pondering the contaminated sources surrounding him, he knew he needed to tackle them shortly. Gazing outward, he unsealed a door within the secure dwelling and discovered an assortment of firearms, methodically arranged. Activating the diesel-powered generator, Tien loaded a handgun and positioned a two-way radio near Han prior to departing. Operating his vehicle at high velocity, he unintentionally lured multiple transmuted creatures towards him and determined to dispatch them swiftly. Abruptly, a military transport approached from the rear, passing Tian and obstructing his route. The transport's automatic weapon targeted Tian's vehicle, menacingly poised to commence firing. As a military scout with a magnified optic observed Tian, he noted that the typically bustling hokey-pokey roadway was elevated. Tien surmised military personnel were deployed nearby and perceived a critical situation within the city. He wondered about Zhongqing's location. The serviceman cautioned Tian about the external perils and recommended he return to his dwelling via the hokey-pokey. Someone broadcasted that Zone B was besieged by mutated felines and desperately required reinforcements. Chen explained to the serviceman that he departed his residence due to insufficient provisions and inquired about the present urban state of affairs. The serviceman directed him to the designated governmental supply depot and stressed the city's precarious conditions, encouraging Tian to return home swiftly. Tien consented and the serviceman left. As a military aircraft soared above, Tien pondered the existence of mutated organisms. Despite his recent separation from Zhonglin, he couldn't disregard the post-apocalyptic reality and decided to check on her during his trip. As he entered the city, Tien encountered extensive devastation. People discussed another looting occurrence on XX Street, and a deceased female had been located at reservoir number XX. Driving through, Tennessee observed only police, agreeing, saying, "Let's assess the experimental subject's advancement first." Tusa guided her to observe Subject 7, the sole entity in the experimental cohort that hadn't become frenzied. Its potency had amplified tenfold, although it remained volatile and exhibited indications of hostility, though not as mindlessly savage as the unsuccessful subjects. Unexpectedly, another individual approached Tusi with distressing information and murmured in his ear. Tusi was noticeably astonished. The individual explained that they were unaware of what transpired and requested Tusa to examine. Tusa inquired how this could have occurred. Tusa subsequently apologized to Ren, explaining an urgent matter had arisen, and he couldn't continue escorting her. He guaranteed a colleague would assume responsibility. Ren responded that it was acceptable, as it was merely a standard examination, and she would stroll briefly before departing. The individual voiced apprehension, asserting their actions violated protocol. Ren confidently retorted, "We're all under constant observation, so there's no need for concern. Just proceed quickly and avoid delays. It appears crucial." Tuz concurred and pledged to guarantee her safety continuously. Prior to their departure, Ren was conversing with a youth via earphones, instructing him it was time to initiate action. The youth was positioned in a chamber with his portable computer. Verifying the surveillance was obscured, Ren directed him to scan the location for their concealed sanctuary. The youth requested she examine the northeastern corner for a cavity within the barrier or a depressible mechanism. She located and activated it. The youth notified her she had half an hour, to which she consented. Ren proceeded inside through the ajar doorway and located a multitude of corpses preserved in glass containers. The lad inquired about her evaluation. She responded somberly, "It's graver than we anticipated." The youngster questioned if he should summon the commanding officer for assistance. She refused, requesting his patience. As she scrutinized the situation further, she spotted a marine creature and inquired if Ren recognized the appellation, disclosing it was Zhong Tian's paramour. The perspective transitioned to Tian, who discovered his radiation-resistant maize was ready for harvest. Han was elated by the sight. Tian suggested she join him to complete the task expeditiously for supper. She enthusiastically concurred, grabbing an ear and voicing her yearning for roasted corn later. Tian inquired if she was already famished. She retorted that she was too ravenous to merely harvest maize. He directed her to gather some kindling, while he readied roasted corn with butter. She was overjoyed at the prospect. As he cooked, Han sat nearby and playfully inquired what the repercussions would be if she continued consuming food at such a rate and transformed into a plump swine. Tian mused that her hunger had recently surpassed his own. He clarified that the unique harvest could augment their physical well-being, and as her physique matured, her nutritional requirements would escalate. Given she was still developing, increased consumption wouldn't lead to weight gain. She concurred and commenced consuming the maize. Tian observed her in profile and pondered that. After consuming the radiation-resistant produce for several days, both his and Han's physical condition had markedly improved. He jested that even if she persisted in eating so much, she wouldn't morph into a King Kong Barbie, visualizing her potential appearance and chuckling at the notion. Han remarked on the delectable taste of the roasted corn. Tian pledged to prepare a spicy one for her next. Subsequently, he contemplated that with their provisions, even if Han's appetite eventually rivaled Luffy's, they could still manage. Detecting a guest, he wondered who would be visiting at such an hour. Upon inspection, he discovered it was Xiao carrying a satchel. Tian pondered if it contained the sustenance he had provided to Xiao Wei, and what his purpose was there. Tian approached Xiao and inquired about the reason for his visit. Xiao elucidated that Tian had gifted his family instant noodles previously, and his father insisted on reciprocating by sending provisions to Tian's family, which Xiao had delivered. Tian reassured him it was unnecessary, reflecting that he had assisted the right individual. Intrigued, Tian questioned Xiao about the source of the food. Xiao confessed to discovering it in his yard, conjecturing it may have been discreetly delivered by a kinsman or someone who surreptitiously placed it there. Xiao desired to repay Tian's generosity, and also had a query for him. Tian urged Xiao to voice his question. Xiao mentioned hearing about a new grain emporium, commencing operations on the periphery of the southern sector, that still possessed ample inventory. He wished to borrow Tian's lorry to procure some supplies. Tian consented, and Xiao added that he lacked a driver's permit. The emporium was situated in a secluded locale, not excessively distant. Tian comprehended that Xiao was requesting his accompaniment. Xiao guaranteed Tian it wouldn't be protracted, making a plea. Tian reflected on his recent confinement to the farm, and had intended to visit the emporium in a few days to assess the situation. Since the chance arose earlier, he resolved to accompany Xiao. With the automated sentinels at the homestead, he felt at ease regarding Han's safety. Furthermore, Bai's combat prowess could handle even a small contingent if necessary. Tian assented, mentioning their long-standing camaraderie, but he needed to return before midday to prepare Han's meal. Xiao expressed remorse for the inconvenience. Tian instructed him to remain there while he retrieved the lorry from within. Tian directed Han to remain indoors and not admit anyone. She assured him not to fret and lauded Six's competence. Tian inquired about BI's enhanced capabilities. She explained it was an ameliorated iteration and demonstrated its effortless pulverization of large stones with a bam. Bam! Tian questioned if that was indeed the case, and cautioned Han to utilize BE solely in exigent circumstances, in the future, as it could be perilous otherwise. She acquiesced, stating she would refrain from detonating rocks henceforth. Tian affectionately tousled her hair, pledging that he and Zhao would acquire provisions, and return with confectionery for her. Intrigued, she inquired about Zhao's presence and expressed a desire to greet him. Tian playfully nipped her cheek and questioned if she wished to flaunt herself. Bai to others. She asserted that she was now 6 years old and no longer a juvenile, feeling exasperated that no one besides Tian addressed her in such a manner. Tian concurred, and escorted Han to the lorry. Outside, Han greeted Zhao and attempted to recount the tale of Bi, but Tian halted her, instructing her to exit the vehicle and allow Xiao to sit there, so they could depart sooner and return in time for him to prepare a meal for her. As they drove off, Han grumbled that Tian was being unkind, and hadn't permitted her to finish her farewell to Xiao. She rushed indoors to dismiss the incident, and occupy herself with animated shows during the journey. Tian mused that Han could be guileless at times, anticipating a remark like that from her. After a period, Zhao inquired whether it was all right for Han to be home unaccompanied. He voiced apprehension about the prevailing turbulent state of affairs, and worried that the homestead might become a target for malevolent individuals, potentially endangering her. Tian scoffed, asking who would target his dilapidated property, devoid of valuables or provisions. He reminded Zhao that Han was a mere 6 years of age. Even possessing a means of self-protection, she would be incapable of utilizing it. He believed there was no more secure location for her than the farm at present. Zhao questioned if Tian had provided Han with any personal safety devices. Tian responded that he had electrified the farm's entrance, making forced entry impossible and assuring Zhao there was no need for concern. Zhao expressed his ease, then retrieved his mobile phone to send a message. Tian observed this, and Zhao swiftly returned the device to his pocket, clarifying that he was anxious because he lacked sufficient funds and had resorted to borrowing from acquaintances. The scene transitioned to Han, who was engrossed in the animated program. She exclaimed that they should utilize the Rainbow Warriors, proposing a lemon-yellow super transformation, then golden-yellow, and remarked that Zhao possessed the ability to alter his hue as well. She embraced her toy, Hei, and inquired if Xiao could become a member of the Rainbow Warriors. Hei appeared perplexed. Han jested that the previous time she and Tian had encountered Zhao, he was green with envy, but now he was red, which she found amusing. Tian offered some money to Xiao, who was bewildered by the gesture. Tian clarified that he wasn't affluent either, suggesting Zhao accept it for the time being. Xiao refused, asserting that Tian had already provided substantial assistance to his family, and he couldn't accept any more funds. Tian was adamant, telling Zhao to cease his objections and concentrate on driving. Xiao feigned gratitude for Tian's generosity and vowed to reciprocate his benevolence. As they proceeded, Tian realized they needed to continue straight for 500 meters, then make a right turn 300 meters further on. Another 200 meters ahead, they would encounter a road division, and 100 meters beyond that, they were required to turn right. Zhao appeared apprehensive. Just as Tian prepared to turn right, Zhao manipulated the steering wheel towards the left, alleging that the road to the right was impassable, and they should proceed left instead. Tian sensed something was amiss and exclaimed that it was untrue, as he frequently traversed that route. It was the primary thoroughfare in the township, and wouldn't be closed without a significant catastrophic event. He inquired where Zhao had obtained that information. Zhao responded that his companion had informed him. Tian requested his friend's contact details and demanded to hear it directly from the source. Zhao implored Tian to have faith in him and turn back before it was too late, pledging that he wouldn't bring harm to Tian. Hesitantly, Tian commenced turning the vehicle around. In the meantime, onlookers noticed the unfolding situation, and one individual remarked that something appeared awry. He contacted others in a nearby vehicle, questioning how Tian could make the decision to turn back alone. Another person inquired about their course of action. Nan declared his readiness, stating their objective was drawing near, necessitating their intervention. Liang added that apprehending them alive was imperative. They needed to obstruct their potential escape paths and launch an assault from both front and rear. He sarcastically quipped about observing whether they could sprout wings and take flight that day before requesting updates. Xiao then conveyed his apologies to Tian, confessing his betrayal and accepting full responsibility. He tearfully explained his helplessness. As individuals had abducted his father, Tian urged him to compose himself and disclose the identities of those individuals and their objectives. Xiao, weeping, informed Tian that they were affiliated with Tine Run and were aware that Tian possessed the cure for the toxin. They had compelled Xiao to entice Tian away from the farm so they could seize Han and coerce Tian into submission. Tian exclaimed that Han was a mere 6 years old, and they planned to abduct a child. Xiao responded that he was unaware of their intentions, and that they had threatened his father's life, leaving him without any alternatives. At that moment, a vehicle obstructed their path. Xiao informed Tian of their arrival. Tian yelled at Xiao to remain silent, stating that Xiao's inquiries were solely to evaluate him and ascertain if the farm was fortified. When Xiao was using his mobile phone, he was actually communicating with the opposing party. Shortly thereafter, individuals with equipment materialized in front of Tian's residence. Xiao apologized to Tian and urged him to surrender the antidote, as they were significantly outnumbered and escape was improbable. Tian responded that he was enraged with Xiao and had no intention of harming him. However, he was incredulous that Xiao had jeopardized Han's safety. A tearful Xiao offered another apology, expressing his remorse for his actions. But his captors had seized his father, leaving him with no alternative. He implored Tian to provide the remedy. Tian informed Xiao that he would address his transgressions later, and unfortunately for the trespassers, none would escape his property with their lives. Xiao recalled the evening he was restored to health, and Nan expressed immense joy at his recovery, conveying the profound fear he had experienced. Xiao confessed his astonishment at his own survival. Nan remarked on Xiao's foolishness in consuming something unusual that had induced his ailment. Xiao clarified that his hunger was so intense that he could no longer endure it. He discovered an apple in the basement that appeared untainted. Nan reprimanded Xiao for his desperation and audacity in consuming anything from the cellar, as everything there had been exposed to the earth. Xiao countered that they had subsisted on nothing but thin porridge for days, so he had resolved to take a chance. Otherwise, starvation would have eventually claimed him. Nan instructed him to cease his senseless chatter and informed him that he had procured some provisions. They had also been the recipients of multiple food airdrops. Included among these was a miraculous potion that had preserved Xiao's life, which must have been a divine intervention. They couldn't endure witnessing Xiao's suffering, so they intervened to save him. Nan reminded Xiu that numerous individuals had perished from unintentionally ingesting toxic plants. He was the sole survivor. Consequently, they must later visit their ancestral tombs to pay their respects and express gratitude for their Baiyu. Xiao pondered that, if a deity truly existed, such a calamity should not be permitted to occur. He surmised that the elixir had been provided by an anonymous benefactor, someone who preferred to remain incognito. Then he spotted a sack of fruit and heard Nan inquire about his hunger. Xiao was astounded that someone had bestowed upon them such abundance, while his own family had been left to endure starvation. Deprived of even the most fundamental necessities for survival, Nan reassured him that they had obtained all this sustenance, and that he would fetch Xiao something to consume. He stressed that Xiao was still convalescing from a grave illness and required ample recuperation. Abruptly, Xiao recalled something and rose to depart. Nan inquired about his destination. Xiao replied that he would return shortly. Nan insisted that Xiao's recovery was incomplete, and he needed repose. Xiao requested solitude and proceeded to someone's residence, rapping on the entrance. The youth within responded, urging him to cease his insistent knocking, and demanded identification. When Miao answered the door, he was startled by the sight of Xiao, drenched in blood. Miao inquired about Xiao's purpose. Xiao explained that his dwelling had been plundered, and he merely wished to review the surveillance footage. Miao inquired about its nature. Xiao displayed the camera, describing it as a 360-degree cordless remote monitoring device. Miao acquiesced. Xiao requested to ascertain who had assaulted him, as he needed to locate them. Miao consented but urged haste, citing his need for slumber. As Xiao proceeded to examine the footage, he mused that the camera fortuitously captured the ideal vantage point of his alley. He wondered about the individual's identity. Who could it be? Then he observed a lorry and identified its proprietor by the registration number. Upon returning home, Nan inquired about his activities. Xiao declared that he had discovered his savior. Nan inquired about the individual's identity. He revealed it was Tian. He had reviewed the closed-circuit television footage and determined that Tian's arrival and departure coincided with the timing of his rescue. Nan affirmed that Taiyin was a virtuous individual who had not only provided sustenance, but also rescued Xiao's life. Xiao then inquired whether Nan had heard the news regarding the Tianrun Corporation. It was offering a substantial reward to anyone who could devise a solution. Nan was astonished and questioned Xiao's intentions. Xiao responded that he was striving to alleviate their hardships in this infernal realm. He questioned the longevity of their current provisions and their subsequent course of action. He inquired whether Nan still anticipated further provisions from Tian. Nan struck Xiao and questioned whether he intended to repay Tian with such animosity. He lamented birthing such an ungrateful wretch and threatened to incapacitate Xiao if he dared to approach Tianrun. Xiao inquired whether Nan comprehended their dire circumstances, asserting that their survival depended solely on their own resourcefulness. He maintained that he was merely doing what was necessary to endure. That was his sole consideration. As he contemplated their inability to evade their pursuers, he realized they were being relentlessly pursued. 2 vehicles obstructed his path, Suddenly, he found himself encircled. He emerged, firmly clutching Xiao. Chen contacted Tian. He identified himself as a representative of Tain-run Pharmaceuticals. He clarified that he employed an unconventional approach to secure a meeting with Tian. He reassured Tian that his intentions were benign. Chen disclosed their knowledge of Tian possessing the antidote to the widespread toxic contamination. He suggested a collaborative venture. Tian would furnish the remedy, and they would provide their resources, generating substantial mutual financial gain. Tian inquired about the repercussions of refusal. Chen stated that Tian had but two choices. The initial option was collaboration, ensuring universal contentment and enabling all parties to prosper joyfully. Tian then inquired about the alternative. Chen retorted that they would independently procure the cure, insinuating the potential use of coercion. Tian responded that his discovery of the antidote was serendipitous, and that there existed only a single dosage, which he had already administered, and which he had already utilized. Chen telephoned Tian, presenting himself as an associate of Tain-run Pharmaceuticals. He elucidated his intention to discuss a partnership concerning Tian's remedy for the pervasive toxicity. Tian lamented their futile journey, observing their lack of weaponry and Xiao's inconsequential value to them. Had they possessed firearms, they could have simply wounded Tian without resorting to intimidation. Chen remarked on Tian's apparent imperturbability, even when confronted with peril. Chen initiated a call, inquiring about their arrival at the farm entrance, directing them to apprehend the young girl and force-feed her the toxic fruit. He questioned the purpose of electrifying Tian's damaged fence, acknowledging the presence of seasoned insulation specialists. He implored Tian to recognize his own significance and collaborate for financial gain. In conjunction with Tain-run, Tian's expression darkened, and he voiced his abhorrence for coercion. Chen expressed astonishment at the menacing glare of a simple agriculturist. Tian cautioned Chen to appreciate their separate arrivals at the farm, lest their survival be jeopardized. Chen dismissed Tian's admonition as preposterous, confident in their numerical superiority. Chen insisted on Tian's compliance, guaranteeing the safety of him and his sibling. Observing Tian's recalcitrance, Chen commanded his subordinates to sever Tian's limbs while preserving his life. These individuals successfully breached the perimeter of Tian's farm, creating a cacophony that disrupted Han's viewing pleasure. She yearned to permanently silence them. Meanwhile, Tian found himself solitary, repelling adversaries and forcibly ejecting them. Chen, aghast at the tumult, inquired about the unfolding events. The farm's possession of anti-personnel armaments was apparent, necessitating the diversion of the intruders. Observing Tian's farm from afar, a man detected an anomaly as rocks were violently dislodged. His initial suspicion of explosives was validated, prompting his decision to capture Tian alive. He realized that Tian's true capabilities had been underestimated. Tian himself was astonished by the unanticipated augmentation of his abilities, resulting from his consumption of radiation-resistant produce. Over a mere few days, his physical attributes, velocity, potency, skeletal density, and responsiveness had all drastically surpassed his anticipations. In antiquity, one could attain enlightenment through swordsmanship. But Tian opted to commence with a fist. A man brandished a blade at Tian, but he evaded it, sensing his proximity to enlightenment. Let's establish some distance initially, he mused, recognizing the gravity of his enhanced physical state. He aimed his firearm at Chen. A terrified Chen lamented his failure to bring a weapon, unaware of Tian's possession of one. However, if Chen could diminish the gap, the firearm would become ineffectual. He cautioned Tian against provoking the formidable entity supporting him, emphasizing the potential ramifications. Tian conceded, shooting others to showcase Chen's worth and neutralize superfluous threats. As individuals fled, Tian pursued and eliminated them. Chen sought refuge within the forest, awaiting Tian's depletion of ammunition. Evading assaults, he sought cover behind a boulder, noting Tian's cessation of gunfire, indicating a probable lack of cartridges. Relieved, Chen remained concealed, contemplating a surprise assault on Tian, hoping to secure a victory. Meanwhile, Tian accessed his stockpile and retrieved a handgun from the storage facility. He positioned himself above A bewildered Chen inquired why Tian still carried a firearm and questioned if he also practiced martial arts. The setting transitioned to Tian's residence, where all the interlopers lay vanquished by an unseen force, having commanded the elimination of the final trespasser, whose head was obliterated. Bi worried about Tian's potential homecoming and his interpretation of her deeds. Bai dreaded that he might perceive her as brutal and spurn her. Resolved to conceal the carnage before Tian's arrival, she hastened to dispose of the incriminating evidence outside. A grievously wounded Chen conceded that menacing Tian with a child had been a dire error. He implored Tian to cease his torment, vowing to divulge everything if spared. Tian retorted that releasing Chen was inconceivable, but he proffered Chen an alternative, a swift, agonizing demise or a chance for recovery and prolonged suffering, as Chen had ample ammunition and time. Confronted with these choices, Chen acquiesced to answer Tian's inquiries. Tian initially inquired about the mastermind behind the assault. Chen disclosed that it was Liang, the head of Tianrun. Tian commented that it was logical, considering Liang's merciless disposition and his complicity in price gouging. He then probed if any other individuals were implicated. Chen asserted that Liang acted alone, keeping the affair clandestine. Even the most senior managers within the corporation were oblivious. Furthermore, Chen mentioned Liang's recent disputes with the company's vice president and his scheme to exploit this predicament to augment his power, curry favor with headquarters, and remove the VP from the Southern City office. Chen contemplated the central office, recognizing that Tianrun Pharmaceutical, which held a monopoly over Southern City, was merely a branch of a larger conglomerate. He jolted Chen awake and inquired if Liang had reported the incident to the head office. Chen refuted this, clarifying that the other vice president had influential contacts there, and Liang apprehended that escalating the matter would jeopardize his ambitions by divulging the information to that vice president. Chen reasoned that since the issue remained localized, it would be easily manageable. He then insisted that Chen escort him to Liang. Chen received a communication from Liang, who inquired if the task was accomplished. Chen responded that they had apprehended the target, but the target demanded an audience with Liang and the elder. Before disclosing any information, Liang berated Chen, labeling him incompetent if he couldn't resolve such a trivial matter without his direct intervention. Apologetically, Chen explained that Tian remained reticent, and they had suffered casualties in the endeavor. Liang consented to the meeting, directing Chen to bring Tian to warehouse number 78, guaranteeing his imminent arrival. Chen abruptly terminated the call, enraging Liang, who seethed at Chen's impudence. Liang, already present at the headquarters, resolved to replace Chen and promptly departed his office. Liang remained unaware that Tian had coerced Chen into making those statements. Tian then bound Chen and instructed Xiao to exchange attire with him. During the car journey, Xiao expressed gratitude to Tian. Tian responded that Nan was a mere casual acquaintance and Xiao shouldn't become excessively sentimental. Xiao apologized. Upon reaching the warehouse, Xiao and the captive Chen entered. Liang, flanked by 2 men and a bound Nan, awaited them. Liang inquired why only they had arrived and about the whereabouts of Nan's son. Xiao elucidated that the courier had been incapacitated and abandoned in the vehicle, and Chen was experiencing a stomach ailment and had gone to the lavatory. Apprehensive of Liang's growing impatience, Xiao had brought Nan first. Liang scoffed, deriding them as a pathetic group. He guffawed, gesturing towards Nan's battered state, and remarked that he must not have inflicted sufficient harm before demanding Nan to speak, pledging to release him. Nan deemed it prudent to remain silent, knowing Liang wouldn't spare any of them. Nan attempted to speak, but a gag rendered it futile, making it impossible. An enraged Liang insulted Nan and demanded to know why he was making noise before assaulting him. Xiao fixated on Liang, trembling. Liang noticed and snapped at Xiao, questioning his stare and ordering him to bring Nan closer. The other 2 men continued their assault on Nan. Liang sneered, denouncing them as insignificant failures. Abruptly, Tian burst through the ceiling, landing a blow on Liang. Everyone was astonished. Liang remarked that the wall presented a challenge to scale. Tian aimed his weapon at the prone Liang, paralyzing the 2 men with terror. Tian commanded them to remain still. Liang demanded an explanation for Tian's arrival, Chen's location, and if Chen had betrayed him. He then challenged Tian to harm him. How an individual with Liang's intellect ascended to the leadership of Tianrun, implying Liang had dedicated all his aptitude to ruthlessness. He disclosed that the harmed individual was Chen. Liang cautioned that if Tian harmed him, he would have Nan eliminated instantly. Chen inquired if he was certain, positing that terminating Liang was more economical than rescuing inconsequential individuals. Liang commanded his subordinates to rescue him, but Xiao implored Tian to cease. Disregarding the plea, Tian shot the 2 men, challenging Xiao's cognitive abilities. Xiao then hastened to liberate his father. Xiao and Nan prostrated themselves before Tian, conveying their appreciation and regret. Xiao expressed remorse for not holding Nan responsible for his deeds and conceded that apologies were insufficient, but thanked Tian nevertheless. Tian reassured them he didn't subscribe to imputed culpability and that Nan had not wronged him in any manner. Nan censured himself for not preventing Xiao's transgressions, experiencing profound remorse. Tian informed Xiao that perpetual apologies were unnecessary and proposed relinquishing the notion of seeking absolution, as he deemed Liao undeserving of injury. Tian guaranteed Xiao he wouldn't inflict harm needlessly, and entrusted the subsequent actions to Xiao. Zhao affirmed to Tian they were uninformed and could be relied upon, then inquired how Tian intended to resolve the predicament. Tian directed them to assemble the individuals and pile them together, pledging to provide the vehicle. Nan questioned Tian's intentions. Tian responded they had no alternative but to eliminate the incriminating material. After amassing the 3 corpses, Zhao inquired if Tian planned to enter them. Nan assented, drawing Chen aside, and concurring it was imprudent to leave them vulnerable in the desolate area. As Nan extended to reposition Chen unexpectedly assaulted him with a fractured mirror shard. Nan evaded the strike, astonished by Chen's nimbleness. Zhao was startled by the abrupt aggression. Chen elucidated that he was desperate and had nothing to forfeit by taking someone down with him. He brandished the shattered mirror at Nan, but Zhao intervened, absorbing the blow himself. Nan was stunned by Zhao's self-sacrifice. At that moment, Tian arrived in the vehicle and struck Chen with it. Zhao shrieked in agony and succumbed. Nan commenced weeping, confessing to Tian that Zhao was correct about his ineptitude, and lacking the courage to be either virtuous or malevolent. He reproached himself for jeopardizing his father. Due to his egotistical yearnings, Nan accepted that Zhao's fate was deserved and desired to relinquish his own life in return. Finally, at peace, he requested Tian to convey his gratitude to Han, adding that the confections intended for Han's meal that evening were from him, understanding they were something a youngster would cherish. With his final respiration, Zhao expired. Nan was consumed by sorrow. After a period, he and Tian ignited the warehouse and departed the location. The setting transitioned to Ren in her workplace, serenely imbibing tea as someone rushed in. Visibly disturbed, she instructed them to compose themselves and elucidate gradually. After regaining their composure, the individual informed Ren that a momentous event had transpired. Ren inquired about the occurrence, and they hesitantly divulged that Liang had perished. Ren promptly scrutinized the remains and questioned the physician if they had verified their identities. The physician confirmed via DNA procured from dental pulp that the cadavers were indeed Liang and Chen. However, the genetic repository lacked correspondences for the other remains, and no missing person notifications aligned with them. Owing to limited law enforcement resources, further examination to ascertain their identities was unfeasible. Ren dismissed the significance of verifying identities, and instead probed whether the fatalities were accidental or premeditated. The physician concluded they were homicides. Multiple corpses contained bullet fragments, signifying they were shot, prior to being stacked and incinerated within a vehicle. Some exhibited indications of torment. Examining one of the cadavers, Ren deduced that whomever committed this was confronting a merciless persona. She contemplated whether the assault targeted Liang specifically, or Tian Run Corporation. If the former, she intended to commemorate with 2 bottles of vintage wine that evening. If the latter, these individuals were now her adversaries. Tian procured a small explosive device and inquired if Nan genuinely desired retribution. Nan affirmed, proclaiming his willingness to imperil his life for it. Tian then relinquished the explosive to Nan, clarifying that he had addressed the manageable traces, but couldn't ensure that Tian Run wouldn't uncover any clues implicating him. This served as a cauty. Nan comforted Tian, guaranteeing the bomb would detonate as planned without a hitch. Tian then divulged all his secrets to Nan and accompanied him home, ringing Han to inquire about her presence there. Nan was perplexed by Han's composure amidst everything, even the presence of a robotic canine in the residence. Outside, Han had positioned a hoist in a small sand pile to conceal the corpses. She noticed Tian and Nan's arrival, and refuted any misconduct, asserting she was merely engaged in an excavation game and hadn't uttered anything inappropriate. Tian rebuked her, having observed her actions. This prompted her confession of dishonesty. Due to her fear of his disapproval, should he uncover her brutal deeds, dreading his potential rejection, he questioned the possibility of ever not wanting her. She clarified that her fear stemmed from taking lives. Nan pondered if that was the root cause. Tian soothed Han, declaring unwavering support regardless of her transgressions, pledging to shoulder any burden together. He stressed her paramount importance within his family. From start to finish, he expressed joy in her self-preservation skills, encouraging authenticity, and promising guidance, alleviating any sense of obligation. He commended her for neutralizing those with harmful intent, thwarting potential harm to others. Han then proclaimed she would retaliate against any would-be tormentors. Tian and Nan contemplated the rapid global transformations and the necessity of adaptation. Han then disclosed everything to Tian, who sought clarification about the individuals clad in red and her resulting animosity. She commanded BI to eliminate them, a directive BI acknowledged, recalling how those individuals had breached the barrier and interrupted her cartoon viewing, a color she found disquieting. Tian inquired if others also possessed colors. Han affirmed, describing Tian with a tranquil blue, He with an inviting green, and Xiao also linked to the unsettling red hue. She noted Nan's color as gray with a tinge of green, observing that some passers-by were also gray. Tian pondered the commonality among those emitting red, suspecting shared malevolence towards Han. Beyond perceiving colors, he inquired, had she detected any accompanying words or symbols? He questioned if Han was also a participant. She denied observing any textual elements. He asked when the color perception began. She responded that it commenced about a week prior. Tian speculated that this aptitude manifested after the destruction season commenced, confirming Han's non-player status due to her lack of system awareness. Pondering this, he pinched her cheeks, a habitual gesture during contemplation. Tian deemed it a probable evolutionary response to consuming radiation-resistant produce. He smiled, and she playfully remarked on his potential for intimidation. He expressed his contentment. Tian considered that, in that scenario, the food system's crops lacked the adverse effects of irradiated produce, but carried a higher mutation probability. They had both consumed radiation-resistant food for mere days, yet experienced substantial physiological enhancements. Han had also developed emotional perception, resembling a proximity program or humanoid reconnaissance apparatus. Yin christened his ability the Eye of Truth, and dubbed Han's the Eye of Good and Evil. He expressed marvel at her talent, noting its utility to him. When she inquired about future assistance, he assented. He confirmed that any future detection of red-emitting individuals warranted his notification, as she was his most invaluable aid. His gentle touch elicited her happiness. He then inquired about her hunger, offering to prepare a meal. He readied the food, and the trio dined together. Tian informed Han that henceforth, Nan would reside with them, assisting with agricultural tasks. Nan admitted his incomplete understanding, but vowed compliance with Tian's directives. Delighted, Han inquired about Nan's living arrangements. Nan explained his intention to construct a straw hut near the entrance, for habitation and surveillance. Han then questioned Xiao's fate given Nan's cohabitation. Nan explained Xiao's departure to another realm, for atonement. Han remarked on the seemingly short lifespan of those emitting red light and harboring ill will towards Tian. She pledged Bai's retribution upon anyone who dared to harass Tiano. Tian lauded Han for her sharp intellect and recommended she concentrate on her meal. Nan believed the situation couldn't escalate further. Moreover, his hands were already crimson with blood, but now he was free of concern, provided he could facilitate his son's vengeance. He was prepared to be Tian's loyal guard. The perspective shifts to a man observing a news briefing. A spokesperson declared it was a fortnight after the calamity, with a total death count of 38.6 million on Blue Star and 4.7 million within the Yanhuang Federation. The national government was diligently relocating grain stockpiles and hydroponic. Cultivation techniques would soon be amplified for mass production. He implored everyone to remain calm. The man's son drew near and inquired about his potential contribution. The man questioned if he had perused Ren's analysis. The boy affirmed and stated that Liang was deceased. The man commented on Tian being a lucrative asset and mourned his demise, observing that the transmutation process had accelerated. He indicated that the Military Police Command Center had apprehended a level 5 metamorph in the mountains. On the southern Jing border, his son expressed astonishment at this news and inquired how a level 5 mutant creature could have developed when their current research capabilities only extended to level 3 or resulted from his synthetic accelerants. In the dense, uncharted forest depths, radioactive flora flourished. Even the most basic organisms consumed one another, heightening the mutation rate. The father remarked that their present fabrication methods were susceptible to unforeseen organic evolution. He directed King to assume control of the laboratory there, and Ren had uncovered that Liang's clandestine tests had employed numerous fascinating techniques. They intended to merge these findings with their existing assets and guarantee the swift retrieval of the virus. Jing concurred with the strategy. Ren sat in her office contemplating that. The documentation from 48 hours prior seemed completely unremarkable, implying the cause of his death resided within that brief time frame. However, the surveillance recordings from those critical days had been purged by Liang, depriving them of leads Focusing on this appeared unproductive currently. They needed to determine the site for the new research facility. And Ren still had to receive the incoming director. Exiting her office, she greeted Jing, who arrived from the south. Following a handshake and introductions, Ren observed a man behind Jing and inquired about his identity. Jing clarified that he was Kui, King's aide. Jing then mentioned hearing from Ren about a suitable research center and requested a viewing. She consented, indicating several locations on the city's periphery from which he could select. Meanwhile, the scene transitioned to Tian, who was examining the aquatic livestock in the pond. Tian possessed fish ranging from level 1 to level 5, and he admired the diverse array of species. He remarked that the points needed to acquire various fish types at the same level remained uniform. Suddenly, he noticed a bluefin tuna, a rare pre-apocalyptic delicacy available for 500 points. Enthusiastically, Tian inquired if Han enjoyed bluefin tuna. She asked if it was the pricey fish that melted in one's mouth. Tian confirmed her query, adding that they previously lacked the means for such extravagance, but now they could indulge freely. Han gleefully expressed her eagerness to consume it. Tian assembled his tools and proposed they utilize the excavator to construct a fish pond together. Han enthusiastically concurred, and He accompanied them with the excavator. Ian, Han, He, and Nan reached an open expanse. Tian directed them to commence digging there. Nan caressed He and inquired about its age, observing its substantial growth. Tian clarified that He had reached maturity and shouldn't be increasing in size further. Nan speculated if He had gained weight due to the farm's nutritious food, recalling when He initially only reached Nan's knees and now extended to their thighs. Tian concurred, realizing that constant proximity had rendered the incremental changes less apparent. He worried about potential abnormalities like Bai's, but felt reassured as all toxic plants had been eliminated since Bai's incident. Tian pondered if He's growth stemmed from consuming radiation-resistant crops like Han. He resolved to observe He vigilantly to avert any complications. At that moment, Tian detected an approaching guest and wondered about their identity. As he turned to investigate, Nan inquired about the source of his distraction. Tian noted 2 men and a woman nearing, posing a threat level of 8. It was Ren, Jing, and Kuai. Jing knocked on the gate, and Ren addressed Jing if a personal inspection of the chosen property was truly necessary. He highlighted the superior facilities and reinforced security measures available there. Jing confirmed the farm's prime location and ample dimensions, planning to conclude the acquisition before relocating their operations. Ren yielded to Jing's choice. She sensed that beneath his smile, he remained aloof and unapproachable. He hadn't even acknowledged her diligent efforts in securing those limited options. She remarked on the prolonged absence of prospective buyers. Expressing doubt that any would materialize now, Jing directed Koi to persist in knocking, resolute in her attempt to capture Tian's attention. Upon Tian's arrival and inquiry regarding their purpose, Jing identified Tian as the proprietor and requested a private discussion regarding a business matter. Tian declined entry past the gate, insisting on a brief conversation from their current positions. Citing his busyness, Jing acquiesced, attributing the urgency to the external turmoil. Perplexed by Tian's attitude, Ren presented herself as the chief executive of Tian Run Company and stated their objective to acquire the farm. Inquiring about his asking price, Tian questioned their prior knowledge of his property. Ren pledged to accommodate Tian's requests regarding the name, the financial terms, or any other stipulations. She even extended an offer of a residence in the city's central villa district, should he require it. Tian resolutely declined, articulating his desire to remain in his present location. Ren urged him to consider their proposition, implying that as a fellow Southerner, Tian might be familiar with Tian rune standing and potentially reconsider his stance. Tian reaffirmed his satisfaction with his circumstances, declaring that even immense wealth wouldn't persuade him. Exasperated, Koi angrily slammed the gate shut, activating a security warning on Tian's system. The alert indicated a low-level breach with a force of 2 and inquired about Tian's desire for countermeasures. Tian declined, observing that Koi could effortlessly provoke a substantial retaliation. With a single blow, Jing reprimanded and struck Koi, invoking their leader's principles and cautioning against such unauthorized actions. Koi apologized, acknowledging his transgression. Tian found the episode curious. Jing reassured Tian, urging him not to be offended, characterizing Koi as foolish and uninformed. Tian disregarded the matter and beckoned Koi closer to the gate. As Koi approached, Tian swiftly and accurately delivered a blow, employing his hummingbird maneuver, forcing Koi to his knees. Tian remarked that Koi had struck his gate, and in kind he had reciprocated, suggesting they were now quits. He then indicated their departure if their business was concluded. Jing, silently smiling, offered no objection. Jing penned a short message, conveying apologies for any disturbance caused to Tian, and expressing remorse for the imposed inconvenience. He included his contact information, implying Tian could reach out should he reconsider. Ren deemed Tian's dismissal disrespectful and presumed he wouldn't call. She observed Tian shredding the note containing Jing's number, fueling her determination to resist being underestimated. As they entered their vehicle to depart, Tian contemplated the remarkable swiftness with which Run had discovered his farm. He pondered whether they were intentionally seeking him or if it was merely fortuitous. Tian resolved to retrieve the discarded fragments of the note and watch their departure. He mused that their paths would cross again shortly. With roughly 10 days remaining until the next catastrophic season, Tian noted the consistent yield of the agricultural zone and the initiation of excavation in the aquatic zone. He envisioned developing a livestock sector as well. Bracing for the impending trials, after preparing the meal, Tian settled down to dine. Han encouraged him to sample her homemade sesame sauce, extolling its exquisite flavor. Tian acknowledged her culinary efforts and tasted it, concurring with its deliciousness. Han remarked on the soothing nature of mutton hot pot during winter, to which Tian expressed his appreciation for its warmth. Nan inquired about the suitability of their attire, given the prevailing weather conditions, and voiced concern over the declining arability of the land. Tian alluded to Han's long-standing curiosity about a certain matter, but refrained from elaborating further. Nan understood and assured Tian of his discretion. Tian explained his desire for Nan's mental preparedness, revealing the extraordinary nature of their current meal. He explained that it could induce gradual bodily changes, such as heightened resistance to cold, augmented physical prowess, and potentially even extraordinary capabilities. Tian anticipated observing Nan's potential metamorphosis. Nan inquired about Tian's meaning, remarking on its resemblance to a science fiction narrative. Tian explained that the apocalypse mirror, materializing and pondering the presence of fossilized remains, it wouldn't be unreasonable to envision primeval forces. He compared it to biological development instead of a paranormal phenomenon. Nan confessed he hadn't completely comprehended Tian's clarification, and proposed they resume their meal. He then questioned if any visitors had arrived that day. Tian affirmed that delegates from Tianrun had come. Nan was astonished and commented on the ramifications. He facetiously pondered if even he, as an elderly and seemingly unproductive individual, could derive advantages from the farm's produce. Tian concurred, recommending Nan retire early while he departed for some tasks. Tian sought the whereabouts of Hummingbird numbered 1 and ascertained it was situated in the Harmony Villa neighborhood. Meanwhile, the perspective transitioned to Ren, who escorted Jing and Kui to her residence. She guaranteed they could lodge overnight and pledged to secure lodgings for them the following day. Jing expressed gratitude, voicing apprehension about the inconvenience. Ren notified Jing and Kui that their quarters would be on the lower level, in one of the 4 vacant chambers, granting them the liberty to select whichever they desired. She vowed to have supper prepared and brought to their rooms. Jing consented to her arrangements and proceeded upstairs, encouraging Ren to also retire early. In the meantime, the miniature hummingbird from Tian's possession flitted around Ren, which irritated her. She vocalized her bewilderment at the presence of mosquitoes in such frigid weather. After bathing, Ren perceived her face as appearing weary from the prolonged day. She resolved to indulge in a skincare spa treatment. Following a revitalizing shower, while gazing at her reflection, she contemplated whether a prosperous and attractive woman, like herself, allowed any space for others. Applying a facial mask, she detected the mosquito still buzzing nearby, misinterpreting the sound for a beetle. Ren opted to open the window to allow it to depart, relishing the invigorating gust of fresh air. After the air conditioning had been operating for some time, as she unlatched the window, she abruptly perceived a youth standing outside beside it. Startling her, the lad vaulted inside. Ren attempted to summon assistance, but he silenced her by stifling her mouth. She questioned if any security personnel were stationed outside. The youth compelled her to recline. She contemplated dismissing all those guards. The lad possessed such strength that she was unable to move or resist him. She needed to pacify him initially. He cautioned her that he would release her, conditioned on her remaining silent and compliant. Conversely, he menaced that he would react more swiftly than her bodyguards with his blade. Ren endeavored to compose herself as the youth uncovered her mouth. She informed him of the substantial amount of money, jewelry, and gold within the nightstand. He could seize it all provided he refrained from harming her. She pledged to avoid involving law enforcement. The youth remarked on her apparent willingness to cooperate. Ren conveyed to him that the world revolved around acquiring wealth, and injuring her would only generate problems. If he appropriated the funds and departed promptly, it would suffice for him to purchase ample sustenance. The youth retorted that he hadn't arrived to plunder her money. She was stunned and then inquired if he was a sexual deviant, fabricating a false pretext for not complying with him. The youth interrupted her and asked if she had dispatched someone to eliminate Liang, inquisitively asking why it had taken her so long to uncover the perpetrator. She deduced it wasn't a robbery and inquired if he was affiliated with Liang. She mused that all of Liang's confidants were deceased, wondering about his origins. The youth responded that Liang had performed a service for him, and now he pursued retribution. He had learned that Ren was probing Liang's demise, and requested she divulge all the information she possessed, as he also intended to investigate. She discerned the youth had come to voice his allegations. She elucidated that she and the authorities were examining Liang's passing, but the leads were scant, and there was no method to identify the true offender so expeditiously. The youth stated she had assumed Liang's role following his death, insinuating her potential culpability. She was astounded recognizing her lack of proof and having amassed numerous adversaries in the southern region. It appeared logical for someone to capitalize on the disarray and inflict vengeance upon Liang. So tragically slain, she maintained she harbored no profound animosity towards him, and his post as general manager wasn't worth resorting to murder. The youth conceded Ren's point and acknowledged her intellect. He found it incredulous that they lacked any potential perpetrators. Ren affirmed the genuine absence of suspects. Liang had eradicated all records, and monitoring related to recent clandestine activities. How could she single out a suspect without knowledge of his interactions? Prior to his demise, it presented a formidable challenge for her. The boy conjectured that Liang desired everything for himself. Offering no trace, she inquired if he would release her. Just as he detected approaching footfalls, the youth swiftly impacted Ren's neck, rendering her unconscious outside. Koi hammered on the door, attempting to force entry, as the servant alerted Ren that the security system had activated, signaling an incident. Koi implored him to rescue Ren. Upon gaining access to the chamber, they discovered Ren recumbent. The servant attended to Ren while Koi examined the window and directed Jing to prevent the youth's escape. Descending, the youth pondered how the formidable Kui had succeeded in breaching the door. Jing commented that forcibly entering a young woman's room in the dead of night was disrespectful. The youth spotted Jing and questioned how he had located him, considering he had vanished without a trace. Jing responded that when the youth triggered the pressure-sensitive mechanism at the window, he had requested Kui to obstruct the exit. If the youth desired to avoid a direct encounter, Jing deduced he would likely attempt egress through the window, which would be his sole means of departure. The youth admired Jing's ingenuity, but questioned if a frail individual like him could hinder him. He lunged to strike Jing, but Jing parried the blow, and the youth suffered a counterattack. Jing bore cicatrices on his leg and remarked on the peculiarity of how the bones in his arm were insignificant in comparison to his knee. He calculated that his forearms, specifically the ulna and radius, should have sustained fractures from the direct impact force of 700 kilograms, and his wrist joint should have been pulverized and dislocated due to their incapacity to absorb such pressure. Yet there were no visible indications of trauma. Jing inquired if the youth had trained in martial arts, observing he hadn't witnessed any exceptional maneuvers. Perplexed, Jing pressed the youth for a response. Otherwise, he would not permit the youth to leave that evening. The youth's hands trembled as he confronted Jing. The youth wondered if Jing had ever engaged in martial arts training. He was incredulous that Jing had successfully intercepted his punch, even though his present physical prowess exceeded that of an ordinary human. It was problematic to be engaged with a proficient combatant. They perceived approaching individuals discussing the commotion they had heard. The youth expressed remorse to Jing, claiming he lacked the time for games, and threatened that during their next encounter, he would fatally injure Jing. Jing sprang to attack, but the youth dispersed powder to obscure Jing's sight. Jing's coughing provided the youth an opportunity to flee, mockingly suggesting Jing cleanse his eyes as he departed, leaving Jing enraged. Jing barely managed to open his eyes and observed the youth leaping over the wall to escape, bidding farewell. Jing's associates arrived and inquired about his well-being and whether he had allowed the youth to abscond. Jing, still recuperating, expressed astonishment at the youth's intellect and exceptional physical capabilities. Recognizing his remarkable martial arts aptitude, resolute, Jing pledged to locate him. Jing assured them of his well-being, simply requiring to wash his face. He advised the man to exercise caution and inquired whether they should pursue the youth. Jing refused, explaining that the youth's velocity would render pursuit futile. He then inquired about Ren's status. The guard proceeded to assess her and reported that her condition was not critical. The youth had merely rendered her insensible. He recommended administering medication from the medicine chest upon her regaining consciousness. As the prescribed amount was indicated on the containers, the servant proposed contacting law enforcement. But Jing argued that the southern region was excessively turbulent and involving the authorities could potentially jeopardize their allies within the military and police. The servant concurred, expressing appreciation and remarking on the prevailing disorder. Kui arrived bearing unfavorable news, revealing that he had inspected the room and discovered a missing hard drive. Jing inquired if it was the gray hard drive connected to his computer, which Kui affirmed. The third boy was Tian, who returned home assuming that detaching the network cable would guarantee no complications. He desired to comprehend Tianrun Company's true objectives, connecting the hard drive to his laptop. He uncovered experimental data and questioned if Jing was a scientist. Accessing the files, he discovered that despite countless creatures perishing as a consequence, Jing remained steadfast in his belief that the world would improve. Tian discerned it wasn't a classified document. From Tianrun, he read about the radioactive sustenance, inducing drastic alterations in the appendages and physiques of animals and humans. These transformations were not merely devastating, they initiated an evolutionary process. Jing felt they had embarked on an erroneous evolutionary trajectory, culminating in untimely demises midway through their lifespan. He was resolute in his quest to discover the true course, even if it necessitated the sacrifice of human existence. He posited that it would propel mankind into the subsequent epoch of advancement. In this prospective era, humans would not be divided by fatal ailments, nor enter the world prematurely with inherent deformities. They would not be perceived as liabilities due to their feebleness. They would command power comparable to that of tigers and panthers, attaining a lifespan exceeding a century. Whether mortality or ultimate triumph awaited them at the path's conclusion, they would confront it with unwavering courage. The narrative transitions to Jing and Kui, who announce their fruitless pursuit. Jing conjectures that the opposing faction might have employed methods to circumvent discovery, or perhaps they hadn't yet accessed the hard drive's data. The primary disk was not registering any communication from the secondary disk. Kui inquired about the significance of the information. Jing dismissed it, stating the hard drive was antiquated and its contents incomprehensible to outsiders. Jing fretted about the point of no return. Should his records be unearthed, they might deduce his genuine purpose for venturing south. Kui remarked on the improbable timing of the attack. Immediately upon their arrival in the southern region, they pinpointed the assailant as subject number 7. Jing countered that if subject 7 genuinely intended to harm them, he wouldn't have dispatched such an inexperienced operative. The individual possessed remarkable physical prowess but lacked honed expertise. Darkness loomed ahead with an abyss stretching behind them. Retreat was impossible. Concurrently, Tian observed the date, November 21st, 2025. According to the Yangguang chronology, he contemplated Jing's philosophies, finding them compelling. Yet the hubris of sacrificing human lives disquieted him. He questioned whether human experimentation had already commenced. Tian possessed a first-level Bamajian piglet, a first-level Windsor rabbit kit, and a first-level Qingyan chick. Upon presenting them to Han, her face illuminated with delight as she inquired about the origin of the adorable creatures. Tian deemed a complex explanation beyond her comprehension, contemplating how to simplify it for her. Inspiration struck. He claimed possession of a doryman satchel, capable of producing any desired object. Her excitement surged as she questioned its veracity. He affirmed its truthfulness. Jian urged her to maintain their shared secret. She readily consented, surprising him with her swift understanding. He then observed Han cradling and playing with the rabbit kit. He cautioned her against trifling with their valuable sustenance, and instructed her to return it promptly to the enclosure. She was stunned to learn of the rabbit's culinary fate, and pleaded for its life, citing its charm and diminutive size. Because it's so adorable and still a baby. Tian tantalized her with descriptions of zesty rabbit cuisine, then transitioned to savory pork belly burgers. He enumerated Hainanese chicken rice, barbecued chicken drumsticks, sautéed diced rabbit with preserved peppers, chicken and rice casserole, and pork cutlet with rice. He continued with fiery rabbit stew, pepper and ginger rabbit served with rice. Han contemplated the necessity of adopting vegetarianism. She wavered, but Tian urged gratitude for their hard-earned provisions and insisted on consuming every morsel without waste. He explained the potential anguish of developing emotional attachments to livestock, advising her to entrust that responsibility to him. He extended his hand and she relinquished the rabbit, pledging to henceforth devour everything completely. Tian received congratulations on the plantation's cultivation of a remarkable specimen, albino maize, requiring immediate harvest. He pondered the nature of this extraordinary yield. Tian instructed Han to amuse herself while he inspected the maize field. She acquiesced and departed. Tian's examination revealed the albino maize as a second-level rarity, a single-use consumable. It was an exceptionally uncommon mutation derived from radiation-resistant maize, occurring with a probability of 1 in 100,000. Its effect: inducing a frenzied state in the consumer, augmenting strength, velocity, and reflexes tenfold for a duration of 30 seconds. Tian likened a 30-second rampage with decuplicated strength to the effects of Popeye's spinach. He wondered if it was unique or if additional rare specimens existed. He conducted a thorough search, but was met with disappointment. He concluded that such rarities were exceptionally elusive and arose only from extraordinary fortuity. During planting, the system provided no indication of special yields. Jin considered the discovery of the albino maize a pleasant windfall. Intensified cultivation seemed necessary to amplify their harvest. Wouldn't this enhance the likelihood of generating rare maize variants? However, he recognized a potential misdirection of priorities. Expanding the cultivated area would undoubtedly elevate the possibility of generating exceptional produce. Nevertheless, it also risked diminishing the overall harvest quality. Furthermore, it might yield a multitude of frail and deceased specimens. He resolves to cultivate his land with integrity, eschewing expedient measures. His paramount need currently is to accumulate points, and acquiring uncommon commodities would be a welcome bonus. The perspective transitions to Ren, who is recuperating and contemplating the burglar who infiltrated her residence. Inquiring about Liang, she pledges to apprehend him and inflict severe retribution. She condemns her own security measures, denouncing her guards as incompetent for their failure to detain a lone individual. Despite their numerical advantage, the armed forces and law enforcement lack the available personnel for an inquiry. Consequently, if she desires to ascertain the thief's identity, she cannot employ conventional methods. Ren recollects possessing one of his hairs, which became entangled in her garments. It's too fair to be her own. Therefore, it must belong to the assailant who accosted her that evening. She endeavors to banish thoughts of him, yet she remains resolute in her pursuit to apprehend him. Subsequently, she descends the stairs, informing Jing of her desire to converse. Jing, engrossed in a book and partaking of tea, glances upward and inquires about her well-being. She takes a seat, expresses gratitude, and remarks on the efficacy of the massage techniques he imparted, emphasizing the complete absence of discomfort she experienced that day. She appraises him of having secured premises for his research facility. Situated in proximity to the central district, the building formerly served as a manufacturing plant. Owing to unforeseen circumstances, it ceased operations and was acquired by them at a minimal cost. Its locale is advantageous, characterized by tranquility and seclusion ideally suited to Jing's prerequisites. Jing expressed remorse, stating that her visit undoubtedly implied a further matter for discussion. She concurred, acknowledging a degree of awkwardness. She conceded, admitting a slight embarrassment. She posited that Jing, as a specialist in biological investigations, possessed the capability to conduct comprehensive DNA comparisons. She inquired about his willingness to assist in identifying a DNA correspondence. Using a hair specimen originating from the southern region, he responded that comparing it against the entirety of the southern population would be an arduous undertaking. Analyzing approximately 100,000 samples would be a protracted endeavor. Merely procuring the DNA specimens from such a vast number of individuals would constitute a formidable task. He subsequently inquired about the individual's significance. She responded that the matter was not of paramount importance. Her sole objective was to identify the perpetrator who had assaulted her. However, if the task proved excessively challenging, they could abandon the pursuit. Jing countered that it was not insurmountable and pledged his assistance. She conveyed her gratitude and inquired if she was imposing upon him. Jinjid was conducting experiments and ascertained that the administered reagent had been diluted to a concentration of 10%. Following the injection, the test, subject exhibited a marked increase in muscle fiber thickness. Cellular activity surged by a factor of several thousand. They inadvertently engineered a creature with multifaceted eyes, as the subject's genetic material had been compromised by extraneous organisms. The experimental subjects transitioned into a state of heightened aggression and breached their restraints. Experiment 5, utilizing virus B, culminated in its 34th consecutive failure, resulting in the shattering of glass and instantaneous devastation. Within a dream, Jing reminisced about a past gathering where several boys were engaged in conversation. One inquired about Jing's isolation. The other boy, identified as Jing's sibling Jin, cautioned against disparaging remarks about his brother. He used a derogatory term. They devised a plan to torment Jing by submerging his face in water, intending to restrain him until he consumed it. Their actions were intended to humiliate him. Jing's brother instructed the others to exercise restraint while holding him, emphasizing the importance of avoiding any visible marks and reminding them that despite his illegitimate status, Jing bore the family name and was obligated to fulfill their father's aspirations. The others concurred, while Jing, amidst coughs and tears, implored his brother to release him. Their continued taunts further incensed his brother. Jing awakened in his bed, perspiring and pleading for mercy, before realizing it had been merely a nightmare. Currently, V-shaped viruses had attained greater stability. Jing believed that the creation of the ideal mutant would bring him closer to eclipsing his brother's achievements. The setting changed to Tian's residence, where Han was observing the news broadcast. The report indicated that 19 days had elapsed since the global transformation. Numerous carcasses of mutated livestock, exceeding 100 in quantity and of indeterminate provenance, had been discovered amassed in Nanxi town. The epidemiological division had already disposed of the remains. Tian inquired why she wasn't viewing animated programs, and if she had commenced watching news broadcasts. She retorted that she was weary of being treated as a juvenile and had been diligently monitoring current events. She asserted that she couldn't perpetually remain under his protection. He reminded her of her ability to perceive malevolent intentions, which was already proving beneficial to him. She smiled, expressing her desire to accelerate her progress and provide greater assistance, commensurate with his increasing strength. Therefore, Han required increased strength as well. Qin pondered that he had been monitoring Han for some time. He observed that she didn't have a tendency to become frenzied. The alterations in her physique appeared to be attributable to adaptation. This stemmed from the radioprotective substances, a fact which eased his concerns. He informed her that he and Nan intended to proceed excavating the pond, so that when Han experienced hunger, she could consume some nourishment. 60 minutes later, feeling slightly peckish, she spotted a diminutive container on the surface and questioned its contents. Upon opening it, she discovered divine gain seeds. Level 4. Tian had previously stated that he and Nan were cultivating the nuts. She revealed to Han that there were 2, one for each of them. She sampled one and offered the remaining one to Han. Deeming it unpalatable due to its bitterness, she expelled it, finding it difficult to consume. The experience necessitated rinsing her mouth afterward. Han experienced intense drowsiness and malaise. During the nocturnal hours, as everyone slumbered, Han vocalized loudly, rousing Nan, who inquired about the source of the commotion. Illuminating the area, Nan witnessed Han regurgitating blood, subsequently transforming, undergoing a metamorphosis. She lunged towards Nan, initiating an assault. Nan, through some means, successfully rescued him and pondered Han's predicament. She appeared drastically different from her prior state. Nan speculated that she had genuinely morphed into a Lupin creature due to the transformation, yet it deviated from typical occurrences. Discerning no immediate indications of further hostility, Nan endeavored to pacify her. He reassured her of his identity as her Uncle Nan. Han surveyed her surroundings and Nan scrutinized her movements. Nan inquired about her hunger and offered to provide sustenance. Han's bark startled Nan, shattering the window. Han leaped outside and subsequently scaled the elevated barrier with ease to make her escape. Nan was astonished by her nimbleness. Etienne appeared, inquiring about the events that had transpired. Nan recounted Han's sudden outburst and subsequent flight. He was perplexed by Han's abrupt descent into madness, as she bore no resemblance to any other mutated creature he had encountered. Furthermore, she seemed to acknowledge him. Tian was stunned and bewildered upon hearing this. Han joined them, calling out to both individuals. She became aware of Han's disappearance and awoke to discover her absence from her bedside. She inquired about their presence outside. Tian soothed her anxieties, proposing that Han might have been experiencing boredom from prolonged confinement within the dwelling and might return after a brief period of roaming. He urged her to resume sleeping. Assuring her that all would be well, Han protested, emphasizing that Han never departed from her side during her sleep, and inquired about Uncle Nan's implication of erratic behavior. Tian noticed her unshod feet and lifted her, expressing solicitude. She articulated her apprehension about Han potentially emulating Bi's fate. Tian counseled her against excessive worrying, and inquired whether Han had ingested anything atypical recently. Han responded that they typically consumed food cultivated on the farm, and had also partaken of some of Tian's container containing the developing nuts. During the afternoon, Tian questioned if she was referring to the level 4 divine grain seeds, and hypothesized that Han might have undergone an evolution. He pondered the cause of her agitation, and subsequently consulted his system, inquiring whether consuming the level 4 grain seeds could induce adverse reactions, potentially resulting in a loss of control. Discovering the system's unresponsiveness, Tian became apprehensive. Tian informed Han of his intention to retrieve Han, requesting her to be well-behaved and return to bed with Grandpa Nan. She adamantly insisted on Han's return. Tian reassured her, alleviating her worries, pledging to return Han safely due to her familial status. Han continued her flight, experiencing escalating heat. A transformation was affecting her eyes. She contemplated attacking the throats of all living beings, but recognized the prohibition against harming humans, lest she forfeit the ability to return to her master. A female attired in an overcoat identified Han as a consecrated creature from the oracle, and felt an irresistible urge to retrieve her, believing it would garner divine favor. Tian utilized his bicycle to search for Han, while his surveillance mosquitoes reported their unsuccessful search. He deduced that Han must have departed the vicinity and required swift retrieval. Should the military authorities locate Han, her demise would be probable. Subsequently, the woman approached Tian, having observed Han and inquired whether he was seeking the melanistic canine, and if she belonged to him. Tian inquired about Han's whereabouts. The woman questioned his knowledge regarding the underlying cause of the apocalypse. Bewildered and preoccupied with locating Han, Tian urged her to simply disclose the canine's direction, and asserted his disinterest in any other matters. The lady elucidated that the calamities were retribution for humanity's transgressions, and the apocalypse would persist until the entirety of humanity was eradicated. She proposed that Tian could secure his own survival by affiliating with their self-improvement association, and offering a heartfelt apology to the divine for a shot at survival. Tian pondered if this was some sort of novel evangelical scheme. He then inquired about any prerequisites for enrolling in this association. She responded that their mutual aid group had a tiered system of affiliation, catering to all entities with varying ranks, necessitating diverse subscription charges. These ranged from 3,000 to 300,000 credits. The loftier the tier, the nearer one was presumed to be to the deity, and the more substantial the likelihood of redemption. However, given that Tian was the guardian of the hallowed creatures, she proposed he could merely enlist the animal in the fellowship. Tian retorted, advising her to educate herself on indoctrination and manipulation prior to attempting to mislead individuals. Insulted, she questioned how he dared to profane the Almighty. Tian dismissed her, stating he lacked the leisure to indulge her, and questioned if deliverance could be attained through devoutness, contending that individuals were responsible for their own salvation. With that, he departed. As Tian exited, she remarked that those who lacked faith in the divine would endure perpetual torment in the abyss, deeming him the most despicable of beings. He was reminded of the bygone days, when Tian was positioned roadside, indulging in a cigarette beside Hei's vehicle. Abruptly, he perceived a sound and proceeded to examine, discovering a canine prostrate encircled by blood. Tian speculated it might have been struck by an automobile while traversing the nearby roadway. He spotted a diminutive and endearing canine adjacent to the deceased one. Tian lifted the small canine and was astonished to find it still living. It appeared the lifeless canine was the pup's maternal figure and had perished several days prior. Yet the tiny canine was remarkably tenacious. He held the charming pup in his hand and commented on the multitude of individuals who had been bereaved of their parents. Akin to this pup, Hei disrupted his contemplation as the pup nipped at a man's leg, provoking a scream from the man. Several men were nearby with apparatus. One of them recommended escalating the situation, declaring Xiao Wu wouldn't endure much longer. Jing arrived and inquired how the transmuted beasts infiltrated. The man clarified that Xiao Wu had developed a nicotine dependency and had ventured into the forest to smoke. He discarded his cigarette ember at the creature, inciting it to become aggressive and assail him. Jing questioned how they permitted such an incident to transpire. The man countered that the beast wasn't concealed in the undergrowth, and Xiao Wu hadn't detected it until subsequently. They had already alerted the military authorities to address the predicament. Jing requested him to reiterate his statement, inquiring if they were alleging the mutant was lurking in the shrubbery. The man affirmed this. Jing contemplated that inferior mutant beasts would simply roam, aimlessly, pursuing the warmth of living organisms, implying this could be a superior mutant beast. Furthermore, the mutant merely bit the security officer's leg without terminating him, suggesting it comprehended the peril of firearms and was endeavoring to utilize the guards as a barricade, which was alarmingly astute. If they apprehended and examined it, they might be able to overcome the volatility of the V virus. This was the ideal mutant beast Jing had been seeking. Jing commanded them to assemble all available personnel and secure the mutant beast alive prior to the arrival of the military police. They were to be furnished with tranquilizer rifles and sedatives, stressing the necessity of capturing the beast alive. Jing dispensed firearms to everyone and cautioned them to exercise prudence, targeting the extremities as they discharged their weapons. He evaded some projectiles but was struck and commenced fleeing. Jing ordered them to pursue him. Meanwhile, Tian was at his residence when the secondary hummingbird communique arrived, indicating substantial canine paw imprints, located approximately 700 meters southeast. Tian hastened to the locale and scrutinized the paw impressions. He detected vestiges of recent blood and deduced that they hadn't been present for long, likely belonging to He. He pondered what had transpired and how He had sustained such grievous injuries. The individuals from Jing's contingent were pursuing Rao, the canine, in their vehicles. Jing mused that no transmuted creature could achieve such velocity, and he was enthralled to observe its muscular definition while in motion, marveling at the creature's elegance. He was resolute in his intent to apprehend the canine. Meanwhile, Tian located He and directed the hummingbird to display him. He witnessed He being pursued by automobiles. Upon magnifying the image, he recognized Jing amongst the occupants of the vehicles. Tian questioned why Jing was pursuing He, and if he intended to capture He for experimentation. Tian retrieved an Alban core from his repository, resolved that those individuals wouldn't escape accountability. The pursuers were discharging their weapons at He, who evaded their assaults as he continued onward. Jing communicated with the other two vehicles in his group and instructed them to encircle He from both flanks. They concurred and assumed their positions. As they readied themselves to implement the strategy, He detected their presence. Utilizing a tree for leverage, he vaulted over a vehicle, precipitating a collision. A man discharged a firearm at He, but Tian rapidly intervened, enveloped in a brilliant white aura. Employing his abilities, he intercepted and deflected the projectile. He discerned that, having ingested the album core and entered a frenzied condition, he had a mere 26 seconds remaining before its effects dissipated. He pondered if the individual who obstructed the bullet was Tian. Xing was astounded by the luminous white light encompassing Tian. Tian was aware he had a scant 26 seconds left and acted swiftly, neutralizing all the men before the power completely subsided. Jing was startled by Tian's unexpected capability. With a mere 5 seconds remaining, Tian closed the distance and delivered a forceful blow, causing Jing to collapse as the 26 seconds expired. Tian retreated, suspecting potential adverse reactions from utilizing the album core. Jing comprehended the imminent peril he had faced and concluded that Tian was too perilous to remain alive. He aimed his weapon at Tian. The bullet struck Tian just as He initiated an assault on Jing. As Tian regained awareness, he found himself atop He, who was in motion at the time. He inquired about He's well-being. Attempting to engage the system, Tian discovered it was unresponsive. He then observed a white substance materializing around and enveloping He. Tian questioned its nature. The perspective shifted to Jing, who was recumbent, receiving medical attention. Someone expressed remorse, explaining the gravity of the preceding events. Jing had sustained a severe cranial trauma, inducing disorientation in his pituitary gland and constricting the cerebral blood vessels. This included a life-threatening cervical laceration. Jing's survival was deemed extraordinary. Another individual conveyed apologies to Ren, affirming they had exerted their utmost effort, but Jing's prognosis remained dubious. Ren interjected, reminding them of their obligation as guards to safeguard researcher Jing's well-being, even at the cost of their own lives. Now, Jing lay hospitalized, his destiny precarious. Yet another man apologized to Ren, elucidating that Jing was resolute in capturing the mutated creatures, and had departed first with the vanguard team. Upon their arrival, the advanced unit had already incurred substantial casualties. With only Dakui surviving, Ren interrupted him, stating she had no interest in justifications. She inquired if he had directly witnessed the assaults. He refuted this, claiming it was too fleeting, merely a white light. Ren abruptly turned to him, admonishing him to fabricate a believable narrative before attempting deception. The man reiterated his apologies, asserting his honesty. Ren reminded him of their substantial remuneration and her disinterest in his attempts to evade accountability. The physician reported Jing's worsening state, citing a declining heart rate and the discovery of another cerebral hematoma. Ren commanded them to exhaust all measures to preserve his life. The doctor responded that it was in vain. Jing was beyond saving. Ren insisted on administering epinephrine, allowing him to convey any final thoughts. Jing managed to open his eyes and addressed Dakui, who confirmed his presence. Jing requested an injection of the V-shaped virus. Dakui declined, explaining the absence of successful human trials and the potential consequences of failure. Jing would not find eternal rest with an intact human form. Jing countered that perishing as human or monster was inconsequential. He refused to be defeated. They resolved to inject 5 milliliters of the V-shaped virus into Jing and prepare restraints and an explosive neck collar. They inquired if Jing wished to contact his relatives. Jing stated it was unnecessary. His family consisted solely of those who shared his bloodline, but that was not his home. He instructed them to commence. As the physicians injected the V-shaped virus, Jing emitted a piercing scream, his body convulsing violently. Ren was astonished by the vehemence of his response, while Dakui remained taciturn, hoping for a favorable outcome. The scene transitioned to Tian, where He was encased within the white material, which abruptly fragmented. He metamorphosed into a hybrid being and emerged. Tian wondered about He's whereabouts. He tapped Tian's shoulder. The focus shifted to Han and Nan. Nan advised Han to retire for the night and not await Tian's return. He remarked that He could not have ventured far, and Tian would soon retrieve him. It would be undesirable for her to contract a chill in such frigid weather. She retorted that she was impervious to illness, due to her robust health, and would await Tian's arrival. She requested Elder Nan to grasp her hand, as it felt warm. Upon holding it, he discovered it was indeed quite warm, and marveled at the extent to which one's well-being could be enhanced by consuming locally sourced farm-fresh produce. She declared herself a highly developed superwoman. Nan guided her to a seat on his lap, offering to keep her company while they awaited Tian's arrival. As they waited, dawn broke, and they both drifted off to sleep in that position. Han, startled by a noise, hurried outside, calling out for Tian and inquiring if he had located any He. She then spotted He carrying Tian and anxiously asked what had happened to him. Tian responded that he had simply brought He back. Nan appeared, taken aback by the sight. Tian then assisted He in donning regular human attire. As Han examined He closely, she remarked on He's significant transformation. Despite the dense fur, He still retained his distinctive azure hue. He hoisted her onto his shoulder, musing on Han's persistent mischievousness. Tian discovered that He was a Czechoslovakian wolf dog with human DNA, genetically advanced with the potential for limitless data enhancement. Tian deduced that He's prior loss of control stemmed from primal instincts triggering a ferocious outburst, prompting his escape to prevent harming them. The integration of human genetics likely occurred during that period. With Tian injured, Nan fetched the medical kit. Tian requested to sterilize the blade and extract the projectile. Nan complied, inquiring if Tian intended to remove it directly, and expressing concern about potential infection. Tian instructed him to leave everything to him. Tian extracted the bullet and contemplated retrieving some ancient high-grade medicinal carrots. He materialized a carrot in his hand, astonishing Nan with its sudden manifestation. Tian consumed it, leaving Nan to wonder if it possessed miraculous healing properties. The wound on Tian's shoulder mended and his fractured bone was restored, leaving only residual soreness. Tian pondered how genetic cells in all living organisms continuously regenerate and divide. On the plateau, aged cells perish and new ones emerge to sustain life. Throughout this process of division and duplication, cells generally remain stable, precisely replicating all components of the preceding cell. However, under specific circumstances, this stability can be compromised, and a novel generation of cells may abruptly materialize at a location, supplanting the original generation. This phenomenon is termed a genetic mutation. Genetic mutations are classified into two potential outcomes. The first is positive development, exemplified by Tian, Han, and He, granting their bodies new and beneficial capabilities, in addition to their pre-existing functions. Tian interpreted this as evolution. The second outcome is negative development, as seen in numerous mutated animals worldwide. These creatures possess formidably powerful limbs and immense strength, but their genetic makeup harbors lethal defects. Even if fortunate enough to regain their sanity, their lifespan remains severely limited. Such is the brutal reality of survival. The scene transitions to Jing awakening, pondering his survival. Others deemed it a miracle, since no human had ever maintained consciousness after being injected with the V virus. Jing's survival at that juncture signaled the progression of their experiment to the subsequent phase, and he received commendations for it. Jing clarified that it wasn't straightforward. Despite surviving, it didn't guarantee that the V-shaped virus had perfectly mutated him. His mutation was still deemed a failure. While possessing enhanced strength and agility compared to average individuals, his physique had deteriorated overall. He had a maximum of 7 days to live, unless he could locate a flawlessly mutated creature and acquire its DNA. By the second day, he still faced imminent demise. Qian braced himself, his upper body ribs configuring a defensive framework across his back. Decay announced the arrival of an investigator from the Southern Military Police Department and questioned the prudence of investigating the trespasser and alerting the military and alerting the armed forces. Jing asserted his expertise in boxing, Muay Thai, Sambo grappling, Sanda, and various other lethal combat techniques. He also possessed a 65-kilogram Golden Dragon insignia from the Federal Sunda Association. His reflexes and physical conditioning surpassed those of an average adult by over 2.8 times. Essentially, he could be considered among the most formidable individuals globally, with few capable of defeating him in direct combat. Nevertheless, his assailant defied human classification. The attacker's power source mirrored that of the flawlessly mutated wolf dog, suggesting he might also be a perfect mutant. Perhaps their perfect mutations shared a common origin, potentially explaining his intervention to rescue the wolf dog. The individual's movements evoked memories of the previous assailant. Dake inquired if Jing suspected the two were the same individual, but questioned the prudence of divulging their arduously acquired research findings. Jing assured him he was aware of his actions. The V-virus hadn't facilitated his attainment of complete metamorphosis. However, if this knowledge could guide him to the ultimate mutation, he could justify the gamble. After all, his remaining time was limited. He proceeded to a rendezvous with Detective Yuan. Expressing remorse for the delay, he hoped his presence hadn't startled her. She calmed his concerns, confirming it hadn't, and inquired if the information he intended to share with the military would pertain to her. He excused his actions and unfastened his attire, exposing the transformations in his physique. He clarified that his current condition defied normal survival expectations. The supplementary bone protrusions continued to proliferate as his body matured, and should his heart be punctured, it would signify his demise. Time was dwindling, and in return, he anticipated her complete cooperation in locating that individual expeditiously. She consented, conveying her satisfaction in collaborating with them. The setting transitions to Tian, situated on his agricultural land, where he procured 19 exceptionally potent divine-level seeds. He contemplated the level 4 divine-level seed classification. Specifically, the cherry tomato. Its cultivation prerequisites demanded rich, superior soil with consistent daily hydration using pristine water. The maturation period encompassed 18 days with a viability rate of 18%. Its benefits included augmented genetic acuity, amplified positive genetic progression, mitigation of detrimental genetic mutations, and accelerated evolution. China elucidated that, essentially. The principal objective of level 4 seeds was to catalyze evolutionary advancement, which he perceived as the catalyst for a transformative epoch for humanity. He pondered the possibility of humans ascending to godhood in the future. With such progress, would he be the progenitor of deities? He deemed the planting conditions demanding, recognizing the necessity of expending substantial points to enhance the land. Despite the considerable cost, he finalized the acquisition. He disbursed 95,000 points to procure 19 good land enhancement vouchers, leaving a balance of 568,000 points. Consequently, 19 standard plots were elevated to goodland status. He observed the nutrient-dense dark soil, suitable for cultivating crops exceeding level 4. and augmenting the output of crops below level 3, cognizant of the limited time remaining prior to the second surge of the destructive season. He contemplated growth accelerators. Despite their expense, he acquired 12 growth agents, acknowledging their restricted efficacy in hastening the maturation of level 4 crops. He intended to deploy additional agricultural automatons to expedite planting, and needed to conserve points for procuring standard seeds to further develop his farm. All the miniature robots were diligently engaged in cultivation, and Tian understood the imperative to maximize his harvest of mature crops prior to the second onslaught of the destructive season. The scene shifts to the urban environment where two individuals in head-concealing white lab coats enter a structure. The first individual poses a question to the second, inquiring about the feasibility of someone of modest standing, like Immaculate Eagle, encountering the Holy Lord in human form. The second individual responds, stating the first individual must convey his observations to the Holy Lord, who will subsequently render judgment. Despite failing to garner the requisite number of devotees that week, if the intelligence proves accurate, they could still obtain blessings from the Holy Lord. The first man expresses his elation and gratitude, observing that his family could endure another month. Only those who exhibit unwavering devotion to the Holy Lord can persevere through the apocalypse. They proceed, conversing as they walk, reaching a chamber where the first man informs the Holy Lord that the pure sheep has dispatched a message, declaring the discovery of a novel sacred creature. They discern two individuals already present within the chamber. One of them requests further details from the coated man regarding the news. He then applauds, proclaiming it favorable news that would amplify the Holy Lord's power. The coated man extends congratulations to the Holy Lord, asserting that with the sustenance provided by the new sacred beast, the Holy Lord's manifestation would soon culminate. He inquires about the possibility of examining the recent arrivals. The adjacent man concurs, remarking on the Holy Lord's weariness with consuming minor delicacies. Their sole task was to retrieve the sacred beast and offer it as a sacrifice to the Holy Lord following his full emergence. From behind them, a cloaked figure utters a desire. He expresses a craving. A man responds with understanding, expressing gratitude for the Lord's benevolence. The figure reiterates his longing to consume wolf offspring. The scene transitions to Tian, who is observing the news. A female newscaster delivers a breaking report regarding a train derailment on a mountainous highway in the southern outskirts. A privately owned vehicle plummeted approximately 100 meters down a precipice on a mountain roadway curve, overturned and subsequently ignited. Yang confirmed the presence of 3 occupants in the vehicle. 2 grown-ups and a youngster, local fire crews, reached the location. The 2 adults were discovered deceased inside the automobile. However, the young girl was located suspended from a tree limb, adjacent to the accident site. Remarkably, she endured and was transported to a nearby medical facility for care. Tian, amidst chopping vegetables, experienced profound sorrow for the little girl. He remarked on the injustice of such a youthful individual. Enduring the bereavement of both parents, Tian then inquired about the current time. His thoughts turned to his own mother and father, who had indicated their arrival home by 3 p.m. It was growing tardy, and he pondered their delayed return. He attempted to contact them, only to discover their lines were disconnected. While preparing the meal, he persisted in dialing, but their phones remained unreachable. The perspective then transitioned to his vehicle, where a blaze erupted and firemen battled to suppress it. Anticipating supplementary fire engines, they discovered the young girl, Han, unresponsive, dangling from a tree. They swiftly extricated her, cognizant of her tender age and a minor bone break, handling her with utmost delicacy. As they conveyed her to the hospital for medical attention, at the hospital they questioned if Han had spoken. Given her youth, she likely lacked clear recollection of the event, and might have been psychologically scarred. One nurse speculated about her relatives, while another proposed consulting local law enforcement and uncovered that Han was an orphan, placed in adoptive care merely 2 days prior. Another nurse expressed astonishment, inquiring if her adoptive parents were among the fatalities, and lamenting the tragic circumstances. A co-worker recommended ceasing the conversation, citing discrepancies in the adoption procedure and the unofficial character of the orphanage, from which Han was acquired without due process. One nurse inquired of another if law enforcement had contacted the deceased's kin. The second nurse responded in the affirmative, confirming the family's notification and imminent arrival. Yuan arrived and asked the location of the mortuary. The nurse questioned if she was present to retrieve the remains. Yuan, in the company of Tian, requested the nurse's guidance. The nurse acquiesced and escorted them to view the two deceased individuals. Yuan offered her sympathies to Tian. He clarified that they were not his parents, and a blunder must have occurred, as only the two of them had ventured out. He questioned the child's origin. Yuan apologized, conveying empathy for his emotions, and recommending DNA analysis for verification. Tian concurred, asserting his parents' likely disappearance. Yuan requested his presence outside until the results were finalized. While Tian remained outside, Han approached and expressed remorse, burdened by guilt, because had she not sought her aunt's aid when the dean struck her, her aunt and uncle would not have taken her in, and these events would not have transpired. Tian embraced her, assuring her of her blamelessness. Yuan arrived and informed Tian that the parent-child DNA correlation was confirmed with 99% certainty. She conveyed her condolences, and Tian, overcome with emotion, tightly embraced Han. Abruptly, a woman rushed towards Jing, proclaiming the arrival of the results. The intruder was identified as Tian, age 26, an alumnus of Jingnan Normal University, possessing exceptional scholastic accomplishments. 2 years prior, his parents had adopted a 4-year-old girl. Tragically, both parents perished in a vehicular accident. Tian had returned to the southern outskirts from Jingnan province, inherited his parents' agricultural land, and resided there since. Jing inquired if that constituted the entirety of the information. The woman affirmed that Tian's history was unremarkable. Even with DNA evidence of the flash drive theft, his culpability in Jing's assault remained uncertain. Jing observed Tian's remarkably average demeanor. However, an average individual would likely have been unable to subdue him effortlessly that night. Tian had displayed extraordinary physical capabilities. Such aptitude was atypical for an average individual who had been unremarkable for over 2 decades. This level of skill was unattainable for such a person if he had been concealed for over 20 years. His skills indicated a lack of extensive experience. Thus, such a hypothesis could be dismissed. Only the second explanation remained viable. Tian's physical condition had recently undergone a significant enhancement. The sole plausible reason was perfect mutations. This also clarified the assistance provided by the flawlessly mutated wolfdog hybrid, as their abilities stemmed from a common origin. The potential of an entity capable of generating 2 perfect mutants was formidable. The woman questioned the accuracy of their initial assumptions, proposing that the Po originated from something beyond scientific explanation. Jing inquired if her words suggested that the opposing side's flawless transformation wasn't attributed to the V-shaped pathogenic agent Tennessee, responded that the likelihood of a V-shaped virus inducing a complete metamorphosis in an organism was a mere 1 in 100 million. Globally, there existed only a dozen or so perfectly evolved individuals. Counting the Beastmaster among them, then how could it be feasible for 2 flawless transformations to occur within the southern suburbs? That rate of success was exceptionally improbable and utterly defied statistical probability. Jing clarified that within their realm, there existed an alternate catalyst capable of inducing complete metamorphoses. The setting transitioned to an office where a man was seated. Yuan presented him with the documents. The man remarked that, should a genuine instance of successful human advancement exist, their armed forces would also express interest and would likely dispatch personnel to observe both factions. Yuan concurred with his evaluation. The scene shifted to Etienne in the agricultural area, where he procured 2 growth accelerators. After distributing them across the field, he observed that the maturation period of the level 4 sacred crops diminished by half. The remaining time until harvest now stood at 128 hours. Nan contacted Etienne, voicing apprehension regarding hay. Tian inquired about the issue. Nan elaborated that lately, hay had been perched on the rooftop and refused to descend that day, regardless of the volume of Nan's shouts. Typically, hay would dutifully descend when summoned, but this day proved different. He remained on the rooftop, surveying the surroundings. Tian found the behavior reminiscent of the eve of the initial devastation period, and theorized that Hay's sense of peril had intensified following his reversionary evolution. He resolved to have the hummingbird sentinel scrutinize a 1-kilometer perimeter around the homestead. Chen pondered aloud the illogicality of receiving text communications at such a juncture, inquiring which telecommunications provider would still be functioning amidst a global catastrophe. Chen examined his phone and was stunned by the content, causing a container of fruit to tumble from his grasp. Nan and Han questioned the occurrence. Tian wondered if it was a hoax And who would perpetrate such an insensitive jest? Han addressed him. But Tian swiftly leaped into his vehicle and sped away from the residence. Meanwhile, Jing observed Tian departing the farm and made a mental note of it. Dakui, who was observing the monitors, commented that deploying a sophisticated reconnaissance aircraft like the UBTWZ covert drone to surveil a farm seemed disproportionate. They maintained their observation of the farm, and Jing directed Dakui to concentrate on a particular zone. Dakui inquired about his focus. Jing explained that they were compact, automated surveillance drones. He expressed surprise at the presence of such miniature apparatuses on a dilapidated farm. Jing also highlighted that the farm's crops flourished in contaminated soil, which Dakui acknowledged. Jing continued, observing that globally, excluding hydroponic plants, all other vegetation harbored the V-shaped virus. He stressed the gravity of unintentional consumption. Yet the crops on that farm remained not only unaffected, but appeared meticulously cultivated. An unusual ambiance pervaded the location, and it was challenging to discern the presence of heavy armaments. Jing, recalling his previous severe trauma inflicted by Tian, proceeded cautiously evaluating Tian's capabilities. Dakui still perceived the site as a mere agricultural holding, but Jing regarded it as akin to a fortified installation. He had meticulously charted the farm's arrangement and intended to utilize microwave pulse weaponry to neutralize any potential hazards. Presuming Tian's absence, Jing anticipated encountering a fully transformed creature, enhancing their prospects of securing it alive. He commanded the unit to mobilize. Helicopters soared above Tian's field, emitting 3 shockwaves to scan the vicinity. Content, they unsealed the gate, and a man confirmed that despite the shockwaves, all electronic apparatuses remained functional. He and his troops disembarked from the helicopters. Meanwhile, Tian arrived at a cemetery to discover his parents' burial site vacant. Astounded, he asserted that it wasn't a prank and pondered the perpetrator. Tian received communications from an unidentified entity, professing possession of his parents' remains. They challenged Tian to verify this personally. The sender granted Tian a day for deliberation, pledging to exchange the ashes for Tian's hand and foot, along with the sacred creature. Tian contemplated the sanity of the individual issuing these directives. His folks would be enraged should they discover the truth. Tian considered bartering his own appendages for their cremated remains. They might even materialize in his slumber. He mused on the import of the Holy Sword SST and questioned if it could be mere fodder. Concurrently, He embarked on a stroll, garnering the gaze of countless spectators. Tian dispatched a text message to the person, inquiring how they presumed to exert dominance over him, employing a container of inorganic compounds. He proclaimed that the individual could proceed as they pleased with the remains of his parents, but pledged to compel them to genuflect and implore his parents for forgiveness. Tian harbored suspicions that He was the individual's target, and dreaded they might eliminate him upon discovering his capabilities. He contemplated the possibility of the individual being the aforementioned woman, although it appeared improbable. A formidable enterprise like Tianrun wouldn't employ such contemptible strategies. If vengeance was the objective, Tian remained perplexed regarding the true persona and motivations of this individual. Tian received an alert of a farm intrusion, observing that the foes possessed high precision, contemporary weaponry with a menace level of 99. Under the cloak of night, troops encircled Tian's residence. They reported, thermal imagery has registered movement within the building's confines. A soldier signaled to hold position, but the thermal signature abruptly vanished, leaving them bewildered as to the interloper's whereabouts. Meanwhile, He perched atop the dwelling with Han on his shoulder. A visibly irate Han declared that those individuals were wholly malevolent. She then commanded He to comply with her instructions and transform them all into fertilizer. Abruptly, every pane of glass shattered, and numerous explosives were hurled into the residence, triggering detonations. The commander instructed the other soldiers to commence their search. All troops stormed inward, and after their examination, they questioned if the dwelling was truly unoccupied. Jing was present among them. Jing sensed something amiss and urged them to evacuate immediately. Suddenly, a luminous beam assaulted them all, and miraculously Jing and 2 companions managed to escape. Jing pondered the feasibility of their survival and questioned the ineffectiveness of the shock weaponry. They discovered that the exterior guards had also perished. Jing contemplated the events transpiring on that unremarkable farm and the presence of combat automatons. He questioned the utilization of such advanced technology. Chen arrived, declaring that it was indeed Jing, and that Jing was present to exact retribution upon him. Tian expressed gratitude for this, remarking that Jing must have invested considerable effort in his investigation. It was a laborious undertaking. Jing countered that investigating Tian wasn't overly challenging, but that Tian had truly surpassed his expectations that night. Now that clarity had been achieved, there was little left to discuss. His lifespan was nearing its conclusion. Failure of the plan would result in his demise. Perishing there was no different than expiring in a hospital bed. Tian relied on his abilities. The victor would claim all. Nan implored Tian to eliminate them, asserting the inherent wickedness of the company's personnel. Tian responded that prior to Jing's execution, he desired a confession. He then inquired about the location of Jing's parents' ashes. Jing questioned Tian's meaning. Both were perplexed. Tian inquired if Jing hadn't pilfered his parents' remains. Jing questioned his seriousness. The scene transitioned to Sheng, Jing's sibling, who erupted in fury and hurled his phone in exasperation. He denounced Tian as an impious scoundrel and questioned Tian's disregard for their mother's ashes. Shang declared that in his place, he would sacrifice his entire being for their mother. He then kicked the phone and exclaimed, "Tian didn't even proffer the sacred creature, resulting in the depletion of all the treats our mother craved." Several men present urged Shang to compose himself and presented new provisions, offering them for Shang's mother's enjoyment. Shang lamented his own inadequacy and his mother's wariness of consuming those vile substances. The two men concurred. Shang continued, explaining his mother's desire to consume wolf pups, but those men were incompetent individuals in positions of authority, who couldn't even acquire a sacred beast. A man attempted to offer an explanation, but Shang interjected, refusing to listen. Just then, his mother summoned him. Sheng regained his composure and expressed his profound longing for her. His mother, utterly pallid, materialized from the well and addressed Sheng affectionately. Sheng was overcome with emotion as she emerged to reunite with him. He embraced her, accepting blame for the situation. He confessed his failure to obtain the desired wolf pups. He pleaded with her to refrain from anger, abandonment, and physical harm, since he vowed to be obedient from that point forward and guaranteed to deliver them to her. She anticipated joy upon consuming them, eliminating any need for anger towards him. It revealed that his mother was in truth a dark creature who declared her desire to devour them. Tian inquired if Jing had pilfered his parents' remains. The revelation astonished Jing. Tian deduced that Jing appeared innocent. Yet the situation remained peculiar, for Jing had undeniably suffered a bite to the neck from He, but he persisted in standing there. Tian employed his abilities to assess Jing's vital statistics and discovered a mere 118 hours remaining for his survival. The analysis indicated malevolent tendencies, revealing Jing's utilization of sinister evolutionary forces to avert his own demise. Failure to trigger the malignant mutant gene fusion within his sibling within the 118-hour time frame would result in his damnation by the very entity that had rescued him. Tian speculated that the flora's emissions had induced the evolutionary malfunction. However, He's flawless mutant genes and their amalgamation had granted Jing a temporary reprieve. Subsequently, Tian grasped Jing's ambition to acquire He's superior mutant genes. Tian declared that even without the theft of the ashes, Jing's objectives would not serve Tian's interests. He couldn't permit Jing's departure. The automatons targeted Jing, poised to fire. Jing pleaded for a pause, proposing that, given the significance of his parents' remains to Tian, perhaps he could aid in their retrieval. He stressed the absence of irreconcilable animosity between them, suggesting a transformation of their conflict into a bargain, predicated on evolutionary genetics and survival. Tian commanded his automatons to cease fire. Jing proposed a reciprocal exchange of assets. Tian inquired if Jin could assist in locating the ashes. Jin affirmed his possession of a comprehensive network of contacts, capital, and technological prowess. Locating someone in the southern sector would be significantly expedited with Jin's aid, compared to Tian's solo efforts. Tian countered that if Jin desired the evolutionary genetics, that single bargaining instrument might suffice, even without Jing's involvement. Tian was confident in his eventual discovery of the individual. Nevertheless, Tian observed Jing's emphasis on his affiliations with Nectar rather than Tianrun, prompting him to inquire about Jing's connection with the latter. Jing clarified his independence from Tianrun, asserting his autonomy and lack of allegiance to any faction. He harbored no animosity towards Tian. Regardless of Liang's demise, the villa's invasion, or Rin's assault, these events were inconsequential to Jing. Obtaining his necessities was his sole priority. Essentially, Tian would serve as an instrument for Jing's ambitions. Tian remarked on the intrigue of the situation, while Nan expressed disapproval. Jing approached Tian, suggesting Tian could retain the convenient accommodations, while Jing acquired the evolutionary genetics for his survival. A mutually beneficial arrangement, he proposed, extending his hand for a handshake. Tian declined the gesture. Instead, Tian moved before Jing and directed Jing's subordinates to crouch in the corner, hands upon their heads. He then instructed Jing to accompany him. Tian escorted him inward to encounter Hai. Han utilized her ocular skill, detecting a verdant aura enveloping Jing, signaling to Tian that all was well. Tian urged Jing to remain calm, revealing that this was the gene Jing sought. A startled Jing inquired if this was the flawless mutant, questioning its current state. Tian responded that, if his deduction was accurate, He had integrated a human gene during his perfect mutation procedure. And the human whose gene He had acquired was Jing. Considering Jing's genetic compatibility, his genes should be capable of inhibiting his malevolent transformation. Jing expressed elation at the sight of the perfect mutant, observing that even high-ranking mutant beast, sovereigns on the southern frontier, who had assimilated human genes, typically devolved into mindless behemoths, consumed by frenetic instincts to consume. However, this particular specimen not only possessed self-awareness, but also obeyed human directive. Jing believed that deciphering its genetic enigma and achieving mass production would yield extraordinary outcomes. Tian interjected, declaring the matter settled. It was Jing's turn to honor their accord. He presented Jing with a numerical sequence, requesting assistance in tracing it. He solicited all communication logs associated with the number, including signal locations spanning the past 10 days. Tian aimed to gauge Jing's information-gathering capabilities, expressing contentment with his selection of instrument. Jing retorted that the task was more challenging than it appeared. He required a blood specimen and possessed fewer than 5 days to decipher the code. Tian commented that Jing lacked the necessary influence to bargain. Conditions with him, therefore, Jing needed to exert himself and locate the individual expeditiously. Jing concurred a short while later. A rotorcraft descended upon Tian's residence and touched down. A gentleman disembarked and advanced towards Jing, inquiring why Jing hadn't sought him out at his headquarters, rather than summoning him there. The gentleman preferred not to be outdoors. Jing presented him with the correspondence, and the gentleman inquired if that was the extent of their communication after his arrival. Jing retorted, advising him against excessive shrewdness and to examine the transmission origin of that number. Moreover, Jing requested him to identify the electrical wiring in Tian's house as compensation for deploying the electroshock devices. Tian mused that the gentleman appeared proficient in this area. Lon activated his apparatus and informed Jing that he wasn't the supervisor, but simply a senior citizen. Tian inquired if Lon was genuinely dependable. Jing affirmed that Lon was unparalleled with technology. Lon commenced his task. Tian then questioned Jing how he had undergone mutation and metamorphosed into such an otherworldly, phantom-like entity, suggesting it resembled entering a divine epoch. Jing responded that it was foreseeable. Tian had accessed the data within his flash drive. He conceded that Tian was superior in that facet of human progression. A decade after global upheaval, Jing's squad extracted the V-virus from a radioactive celestial body. This virus was the origin of transformations in those who ingested it. Through his investigations, Jing ascertained that the V-shaped virus induced rapid cellular division and significantly amplified the probability of malevolent mutations, ultimately engendering misshapen, ephemeral grotesqueries driven solely by their hunger. Jing postulated he might glean insights from Hei's genes in his research, Tian remarked. So these deductions were predicated on extensive human trials. With that virus, Jing retorted that he didn't deem his actions inhumane, highlighting that innumerable data on human physiology throughout time had been procured from dispassionate human experimentation. Furthermore, prior to his affiliation with Tianrun, they had already engaged in unethical experiments under Liang's directives. Instead of clinging precariously to life, it was preferable to allow their test subjects to serve their function and optimize their utility. Jing appended that he wouldn't object to serving as a test subject briefly before his demise. Even in failure, he constituted invaluable data. Tian commented on the sheer lunacy of it. Jing chuckled and stated that biological and scientific advancements had frequently been realized by exploiting countless lives. In such a post-apocalyptic reality, this was improbable to alter. Lon acquired the data and subsequently transmitted it to Tian. Tian, receiving the data on his device and feeling perplexed, informed Lon that he hadn't yet furnished him with his email address. Lon became exasperated and inquired the duration of their cohabitation with only a single image of Tian. Lon unearthed all his information within a mere 10 minutes. Lon added that he had overheard their dialogue concerning his current aptitudes and cautioned that further questioning of his skills would result in him compromising their cameras and broadcasting their bathing rituals. Tian was stunned by this menace. Jing disclosed that despite Lon's loquaciousness, he nonetheless adhered to a professional code of conduct. Jing admonished Lon that persistent gossip gossiping would lead to a reduction in his remuneration. Lon, becoming apprehensive, pledged silence. The setting transitioned to an ominous fortress, where two sentinels in white lab coats stood watch, their firearms primed. One of them yawned and detected an insect before his eyes, which proved to be a hummingbird dispatched by Tian. He pondered the unusual size of moths in such frigid conditions. Tian cautioned him to be vigilant, clarifying that the hummingbird was non-venomous, but acknowledging the prevalence of genetically altered fauna in the present day. He hypothesized that the hummingbird might be a transmuted organism, or something analogous. Just as Tian's hummingbird reconnaissance agent assaulted one man's head, the other guard was startled and disoriented by the abrupt onslaught. Then Tian discharged his weapon, rendering both men insensate with shots to their foreheads. Tian situated himself atop the edifice, the individual accountable for incapacitating them both. From the rooftop vantage point, Tian peered within and observed numerous individuals garbed in identical attire. One among them proclaimed that the Supreme Being, the genuine deity responsible for the creation of the cosmos and all its contents, was deserving of gratitude for bestowing upon them her volition, potency, and affection. They believed she had conferred upon them the gift of hope for rebirth into eternal forms. He called for the initiation of the R, under the authority of their deity Surket, unveiling a container holding something of great importance. The man directed two kneeling figures to consume its contents. He clarified that subsequently, they were required to nourish the fruit with the lifeblood of the offering, to guarantee its maturation, expediting the culmination of their rebirth cycle. They exposed the remains of a deceased female, and the two individuals commenced devouring her flesh. Tian experienced revulsion and fatally shot one of them. The remaining individuals succumbed to terror and escaped. Perplexed by the unfolding events, Shang pondered who had interrupted the reincarnation ritual. He detected Tian aiming a firearm from the rooftop. Shang demanded to ascertain his identity and the reason for his intervention. Ayan declared himself their sovereign and commanded his hummingbird reconnaissance to annihilate them all. One individual implored the others to safeguard the sacred leader, but his pleas went unheeded. They were preoccupied with self-preservation amidst the gradual massacre. As the protectors were eliminated, they recognized the gravity of their predicament. Someone urged the holy leader to retreat. Tian descended, expressing astonishment that they were not plunderers, but instead contemptible villains, more abhorrent than beasts. Sheng inquired if Tian was indeed Tian. Tian affirmed his identity and demanded Sheng surrender his parents' remains, pledging a swift demise in exchange. Observing a shadowy entity emanating from a deceased individual's mouth, Sheng cautioned Tian that eliminating him would preclude Tian from locating the ashes. Tian warned against incitement. The shadowy entity materialized into a terrifying humanoid manifestation, prompting Shang to propose distracting it with inane chatter until they could discreetly withdraw. The being metamorphosed into monstrous configurations. Bellowing as more emerged, each adorned with wings. Tian brandished his weapon, denouncing the creatures as hideous and repulsive, but discovered his projectiles were ineffectual against their resilient physiques. As they lunged to assault him, he evaded them and unsealed the entrance to his storehouse, aspiring to discover an assortment of lethal armaments. He contemplated a rocket launcher or something comparable, but acknowledged his insufficient credits to procure them, having expended them on seedlings the preceding day. Summoning his hummingbird combatants, Tian observed as they engaged the monsters, only to ascertain their firepower was incapable of breaching the creatures' thick hides. He mused that while he had anticipated common ruffians, capitalizing on the apocalypse for personal gain and wickedness, he had not foreseen their possession of such peculiar monstrosities. He resolved to deploy some of his elite fighting units. Tian located a concealed position while Shang beckoned him, questioning his mental state. Tian recognized his precarious situation, devoid of any albino maze, and conventional weaponry proving futile against the creatures. He contemplated obliterating their ocular orbs to gain time. Tian observed the monsters encroaching. As they attacked, Tian narrowly evaded their incredibly swift blows, acknowledging their remarkable velocity. Abruptly, a tremendous detonation reverberated through the vicinity, destabilizing Tian. The scene transitioned to Yuan in her workplace. As the telephone sounded, she responded and identified herself as a representative of the Southern Military Police Precinct. On the opposite end, an elderly gentleman expressed solace that she had finally answered, recounting a detonation near his residence accompanied by peculiar sounds, the consequence of mutated creatures wreaking havoc. He implored Yuan to investigate, as he was accompanied by terrified youngsters. Yuan consented to come and requested the coordinates of the explosion. Subsequently, Yuan directed the police force to deploy a cleanup squad and accompany her, alluding to the potential encounter with level 2 or 3 mutated creatures on the city's periphery. One man confirmed his directives to notify the others. Another individual eagerly inquired if there genuinely were mutated creatures of that tier within the city, conveying enthusiasm at the prospect of apprehending one alive. For a bounty from their commander, Yuan advised against underestimating level 3 mutated creatures, stressing their significantly greater challenge compared to standard level 1 creatures. In the meantime, Tian was propelled against a barrier as the monsters converged upon him. Despite obliterating their ocular orbs to impede them, his ribs were fractured, and he resorted to utilizing ancient, pharmaceutical-grade tomatoes for self-remediation. Sheng remarked that Tian was on the precipice of demise, yet continued to retaliate. He observed that Tian had not even defended himself when gravely wounded, and was likely to become sustenance for the monsters. The creatures lunged to assail Tian, propelling him beyond the wall. Shang questioned if Tian had perished, comparing the monsters to swine. He recollected Tian's admonition against entering that chamber. Oblivious to Shang's caution, Tian believed the attack had nearly struck him. He perceived distress calls and rotated to identify his potential rescuer. He uncovered a multitude of women confined by shackles, imploring for liberation. They wept, petrified by the monstrous beings, yearning for the sanctuary of their homes. Tian pondered if the sacrificed girl was also deemed a commodity, and the extent of Shang's deadly acts. He witnessed the creature's approach, sensing impending peril. Terror gripped the women as the monstrous entities drew nearer. Tian resolved to impede their further advance. He then discerned a structure resembling a storage facility. It appeared the women's exploitation extended beyond mere commodities. Abundant provisions were also present. Gold ingots, jewels, and artifacts were amassed. He hadn't anticipated discovering such treasures concealed within the depot. Tian then spotted a blade clutched by a sculpted figure. He swiftly ascended the statue, retrieving the weapon. To his astonishment, it was an authentic Tang Dao sword. Its exotic craftsmanship represented a pinnacle of global weaponry. The blade possessed remarkable resilience, impervious to breakage, and incredibly keen. It epitomized the zenith of swordsmithing. It was a magnificent armament, a lethal instrument. Tian grasped the sword as the women's shrieks pierced the air. He surmised the creatures were closing in, an ominous sign. Thus, he resolved to test the blade's capabilities. He aimed to ascertain its effectiveness against the monstrous foes. He lunged forward, striking a creature with the sword. It connected, yet proved insufficient. His current prowess lacked the force for a single, fatal strike. This merely enraged the creatures, prompting his hasty retreat. As the monsters entered, Tian lured them into pursuit. They reached an open expanse, where the creatures launched a ferocious assault. He brandished his sword, striking at a monster. One creature lashed out with its tail, propelling Tian against the wall. He was forcefully thrown against the barrier. Tian disentangled himself, recognizing the difficulty in inflicting mortal wounds. Superficial attacks merely prolonged the battle, placing him at a disadvantage. He needed to exploit their vulnerabilities. A creature lunged at Tian, prompting him to analyze its weaknesses. He then aimed his sword at the creature's head, finally achieving a decisive kill. Tian then perceived the next adversary on the opposite side. Shang examined his prized possessions, envisioning his brethren tearing Tian asunder, leaving no trace behind. At that moment, Tian arrived, his sword directed at Sheng. Sheng declared it was finished, incredulous at the turn of events. The worker ants' exoskeletons were impervious to gunfire, making Tian's victory unbelievable. Shang cautioned against provoking his superiors, threatening dire consequences. Tian retorted that, having slain monsters, he feared no one, declaring, "Damn you all!" Tian poised to strike Shang, but a shout commanded him to halt. Tian saw Yan arrive, firearm drawn, demanding he lower his weapon. Zhang feigned innocence, begging for aid, claiming Tian intended to murder him, inciting the officers to fire upon Tian. Tian insisted the firearm be aimed at Sheng, not himself. Yan questioned his meaning, and Tian instructed her to observe their surroundings. She witnessed women bound in chains, their faces etched with fear. An officer informed Yuan that several women matched prior missing person reports, recognizable from photographs. There was no doubt. Yan was stunned by this revelation, observing the supplies with bewilderment. Another officer alerted Yuan to a significant development. A female corpse, grotesquely mutilated, was discovered in the central chamber. Several cult adherents were fatally shot, and 2 mutated beast carcasses lay in the adjacent hall. Wen commanded everyone to remain composed, assuring them the situation was contained. She instructed them to alert the bureau at the medical facility, along with allied units, requesting all available personnel for reinforcement. Shang was apprehended. As officers escorted him away, he taunted Tian, questioning his recourse. Tian, momentarily enraged, regained his composure, retrieving his sword. Yan recognized Tian, inquiring if he recalled her. He nervously inquired her identity. She alluded to the incident 3 years prior, where they both participated in body identification. He concurred, remembering a female officer's presence, commending her sharp recollection. He remarked that she seemed to have deduced his intentions. When she intervened, she responded that while his actions were comprehensible, recklessness was unacceptable. She introduced herself, explaining that Tian's DNA from the vehicular accident 3 years ago led them to him. She implored him to remain calm and heed her words. She stated that Sheng's predicament wasn't concluded and that the authorities wouldn't execute Sheng. She acknowledged Tian's exceptional strength, remarking that despite their numbers, they were powerless to prevent Tian from eliminating Sheng. Nevertheless, she stressed that the Yan-Huang alliance remained under the jurisdiction of the armed forces, law enforcement, and the legislative body. She proceeded to clarify that this was not the appropriate venue for self-administered retribution, and implored him to have faith in the military police. They would not exonerate any culpable individual. It was their obligation, she insisted, requesting him to assist with their inquiry and divulge his knowledge. Upon his acquiescence, she expressed gratitude for his collaboration. Subsequently, emergency medical vehicles, additional officers, and citizens whose female relatives were unaccounted for congregated. The liberated women emerged clad in white garments. The wounded were transported to medical facilities, while those unscathed were reunited with their kin, resulting in poignant displays of emotion. As Yuan escorted Tian, an officer inquired about the appropriate documentation for the deceased. She advised him to report that during the apprehension, they encountered vehement opposition, necessitating the use of force. This resulted in grievous harm and fatalities among the adversaries. The officer concurred. Wen then addressed Tian. "Let's go!" As Tian departed, he noticed a corpse being removed, its hand protruding from the stretcher's covering. A young woman and her mother approached to express gratitude to Tian, hailing him as a rescuer. She explained that if not for the commotion he caused, which alerted the military police, they might have been sold as commodities to the affluent and influential, and ultimately immolated. She reiterated her thanks. The reference to commodities perplexed Tian. Yuan inquired if the girl possessed further knowledge. The girl revealed her former affiliation with a support group, which had deceptively portrayed itself as a cooperative association. They alleged that by recruiting members, they could procure provisions at reduced costs. However, eventually, she uncovered their actual objective and attempted to flee. They apprehended and confined her. Prior to her capture, she observed the whereabouts of their financial records. When prompted for a detailed account, they engaged in a protracted discussion. Meanwhile, 2 individuals observed from afar. One commented that the Sacred Council exerted complete authority, then directed the chauffeur to depart. Afterwards, Tian was allocated a room. He informed the officer that most matters were resolved, and requested permission to leave, citing unfinished business at his residence. Outside the window, Yuan and an officer monitored Tian. Yuan stated her disapproval of the current course of action. The officer countered that since time immemorial, virtue and transgression have been inherently incompatible. Even Tian's commendable actions could not absolve him of his criminal conduct. He was merely a civilian, lacking the authority to usurp legal prerogatives and pronounce judgment or inflict harm upon others, Yuan conceded, affirming his lack of entitlement, but appended that this held true only if the missing women had been located prior to his intervention, and if a warrant for his arrest had been issued by superiors. The officer mentioned that they awaited a response from the municipal council, but it was improbable. The superiors would not condone the presence of a perilous individual like Tian. Yuan noted that in contemporary times, the world had undergone transformation, and both military and law enforcement personnel were significantly depleted. She added that forecasting the trajectory of law enforcement was challenging, despite the lack of response from high command. The man hastened to condemn Tian. Frankly, she posited that he was likely apprehensive about his negligence. Consequently, she intended to submit Tian's evidence of legal infractions directly to the highest authority. Upon receiving a response from High Command, she asserted that this would facilitate his duties. She questioned whether such leniency would genuinely provide redress for the women, who were victims of homicide and human trafficking. Expressing skepticism, Chen retorted angrily, ordering Yuan to be silent. He declared his indifference towards her background, asserting his authority as sheriff and her subordinate status. He commanded her to apprehend and confine the suspect. At that juncture, someone approached Chen, questioning his actions. Chen was astonished to encounter his superior. Respectfully, Chen inquired about his presence. The newcomer was Chief Inspector Yun, from the Handing Province Military Police Department, accompanied by high-ranking Officer Yi. Jun remarked to Yang that Chen had been effectively mentored, demonstrating increasing potential, though he lacked aptitude for apprehending offenders, but excelled at provoking animosity. Chen explained that he was adhering to directives from higher authorities. Chen questioned if the directives were coming from Yang or Dong. He then commanded Chen to remain in place and repeat the law enforcement regulations 20 times. Turning to Yuan Zhen, he stated that the department had filled him in on the circumstances via telephone and requested she escort him to Tian. She consented and notified him that Tian was in workstation 03, gesturing for him to accompany her. As they neared Tian, who was seated in silence, Zhen inquired if he was indeed Tian. Tian rose and verified his identity. Zhen introduced himself as Head Detective Zhen from the Handing Provincial Authority. Tian expressed surprise at this turn of events, and Zhen, staying seated, commented that if a situation necessitated a high-ranking officer like himself to personally question Tian, it suggested Tian would not readily escape the predicament. Zhen chuckled and soothed Tian, telling him not to be anxious, clarifying that he had arrived with a document he wanted Tian to examine. He presumed Tian would be intrigued by the alterations in the two transformed creatures. Displaying the file, he declared the data was specifically brought for Tian's perusal. He presented the file to Tian, who inquired why him. Chen responded it was intended for individuals like Tian, those who comprehended such subjects. The document detailed a mutated creature, located in the Karangma mountain range, by a patrolman 5 days prior. When they cornered it, they observed it consuming humans. Subsequently, they discovered human visages on its back, suggesting it was becoming more astute, occasionally even outmaneuvering their forces. Zhen inquired if Tian grasped the ramifications. Studying the images, Zhen remarked that the monster's intellect and conduct were progressively more human-like. He pondered if their genetic obstacles had been overcome. Zhen nodded in affirmation, elaborating that they had progressed beyond merely merging genes from various animals. To amplify physical capabilities, they had effectively integrated human genes to augment intelligence, birthing a novel species they termed Beast Kings. At least 5 such advanced mutant creatures had been detected in Yanhuang, and that figure was anticipated to rise. When Tian questioned why Zhen was divulging these confidential details to him, Zhen gestured towards a nearby container holding 3 crimson objects. Tian started to comprehend the implications. Zhen affirmed that these were the 2 eggs that had stopped developing. After Tian shot 2 disciples who had transported them, laboratory analysis confirmed they contained genetic code from insects, animals, and a substantial amount of human DNA. Tian inquired what this signified. Zhen responded that in the southern sector, there was a high probability a Beast King was concealed and procreating amongst its own kind. Tian asked to hold on, but with the devastating potential of the Beast King, how could it remain hidden within the city unnoticed? Zhen stated this led to another matter, the registry. Tian inquired if he had located the registry. Zhen answered that, while the Beast King possessed a certain level of intellect, it was still far from reaching the cognitive capacity of an ordinary human. It was improbable for it to establish a structured group. In mere weeks after the mutations began, Tian asked if Zhen was implying there were humans aligned with the mutant creatures, and why this was occurring. Zhen replied it was undetermined. Tian inquired why Zhen was disclosing all of this to him. Zhen responded he wanted to provide Tian with some understanding of the events, and was confident Tian could form a more informed assessment of the circumstances. Tian requested clarification. Zhen answered that, considering Tian's violent assault, which led to the demise of numerous individuals, and caused grave repercussions and adverse societal effects, the military and law enforcement agencies were directed to apprehend him. A warrant for the detention of the offender, Tian, had been issued. Yuan was on the verge of speaking, but Zhen silenced her. Tian slammed his hand on the table, and remarked on the supposed severe repercussions and detrimental societal effects he had caused by eliminating those gang members. Declaring such regulations and laws were truly laughable, Jen advised him to calm down and simply listen. Now that the world had transformed, Jen was going to be completely frank and state that, in the future, the military and law enforcement within the cities might be incapable of safeguarding all citizens, but until the current societal structure crumbled, they would remain the most formidable powers. Based on the current rate of evolution of the mutant creatures, there was a movement towards merging the military and metropolitan police forces. This would entail the military police assuming control of the cities. Unlike the city police, the military police had zero leniency for legal infractions and were as merciless as instruments of war. They had the capacity to harbor Tien and expunge his history. However, they would lack that authority once the military police assumed control of the municipality. Tian requested Jen to elucidate his intent. Jen responded that it was uncomplicated. They desired Tian's enrollment. They could bestow upon him a preferential standing, and even if the military police seized the city in the future, Tian could retain certain unique privileges. Tian inquired if Jen wished for him to enlist in the military police. Jen clarified that possessing an official designation wouldn't be detrimental to him. It would guarantee the safeguarding of him and his kin. Tian stated he required a period for contemplation. Yuan proposed restoring Tian's blade to him, and declared that they expected his response by the morn of the subsequent day. Yuan appended that if Tian consented, he should complete the application, and if he declined, she would dispatch the enforcement squad to locate him. The following day, Tian questioned how someone could utter such frigid remarks. She presented him with the document and the weapon, remarking that fawning over her was futile. But if he joined the military police, none of this would pose an issue. Tian affirmed he would certainly provide his answer by the day after tomorrow. Tian then noticed several men accompanied by a law enforcement officer passing him. Thus, he inquired of Yuan if those individuals were implicated in the illicit commerce, documented in the ledger. Tian sensed a familiarity in their visages and pondered if they were affiliates of the Southern City Council. As one of the men pivoted to gaze at Tian, he discerned the inspector's veracity. These weren't merely affluent and prominent figures. They were members of the legislative body. Tian hadn't anticipated their involvement, and questioned if they were solely engaged in trafficking, or if they were already adversaries of humanity. Tian returned to his dwelling and inspected the level 4 divine, Gain Cherry Tomato. He inquired of Han if she would assist him if he became a military policeman. She assented. He informed her that in that scenario, he wouldn't be able to be in her company as frequently, and she might weep during solitary nights. She responded that she hoped he wouldn't forsake his aspirations on her account. She reminded him that 3 years prior, he relinquished his employment and returned to manage the farm, and she felt she had been a hindrance to him. He retorted that she committed no wrongdoing. He made that decision autonomously. As he placed his hand upon her head, she expressed her desire not to be perpetually under his protection, and yearned to mature swiftly as well. She continued that irrespective of his decision, she would undoubtedly support him. She had Hay and Grandpa Nan to care for her, therefore she wouldn't be apprehensive. He remarked on her maturation, and that he would now entrust her with applying the growth elixir to the divine Gain Cherry Tomatoes, adding jocularly that there should be no idleness for watching animated programs. The setting transitions to the penitentiary where a man approached Sheng's confinement. Sheng maintained a perpetual grin. The man conveyed a small, seed-like object into Sheng's cell. Sheng retrieved and consumed it. The scene changes to Tian, where they extract blood from Hay and provide it to Lon. Tian stated that he fulfilled his pledge. Lon inquired if this was the exemplary mutant beast, observing that unlike the Beast Kings, this one lacked significant alterations in its appendages and vital indicators, and didn't appear particularly formidable. Tian responded that perfect mutation had numerous trajectories. The transformation of the existing beast. Kings might be misguided. The correct course to perfect mutation could entail augmented strength, a metamorphosis in physical structure, or an elevation in intellect. The process of mutation was variable. Therefore, it was inherently improbable for it to be identical each instance. Lon concurred with Tian's assessment and admitted his initial misconception. Each creature possessed a distinct genetic composition. Thus, the same perfect mutant gene might yield disparate outcomes in different organisms. Then Tian inquired about Jing's well-being. Lon responded that Tian had dismantled a sect and Jing had been incarcerated for a duration. If Tian hadn't furnished that blood specimen, Lon feared his superior's gravesite would be overgrown. The scene transitions to Jing, where surgeons were scrutinizing his physique and discovered that the bone spurs regenerated in under 30 minutes after extraction. Presently, they were proliferating even more rapidly, rendering surgery unfeasible. Lon arrived with the blood sample. Jing sat upright and remarked on its auspiciousness. He instructed the physicians to analyze the specimen immediately, noting no. Following examination, a surgeon documented alterations in the configuration of the 20th chromosomal pair. Based on the hematological analysis, the skeletal density was over 10-fold greater than that of typical canines. Furthermore, it possessed 79 chromosomes, one exceeding the standard canine complement. Jian deduced that Tian had deciphered the genetic blueprint. The surgeon elaborated, stating that the supplementary chromosome would significantly augment its size.